Hello, everyone. It is 9 o'clock on the dot this Thursday morning. We are going to get this Grit and Grace conference started right now. I am so honored to yet again be your MC for the Grit and Grace Multicultural Women's Mental Health Conference. My name is Genevieve Rayom. I serve on the board of ASHA International. I am also a reporter with K2 who has covered youth mental health intimately. I consider myself a mental health champion. So being here with you all today is truly an honor. I do want to let you know that we have some incredible content for you today. You'll be hearing some very powerful stories. We do want to warn you that some of the topics that we will discuss can be triggering for some. We're going to talk about abuse and trauma, self-harm, suicide, and other topics that might be challenging for viewers. So viewer discretion is definitely advised. We do also want to make sure you have all the resources that you could possibly need. If you are in a crisis or experiencing suicidal thoughts, please text the crisis text line. You can text hello to 741-741. It is super simple. Or if you want to, you can also call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That is 8255. Both services are completely free and are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We are dropping those resources for you in the chat box right now. So feel free to write those numbers down. Better yet, plug them into your phone so you always have them. Like I mentioned, we have some very inspiring content for you today, starting with an introduction by Dr. Saramadi Krishna, a few topic speakers, and then a talking circle. So that's kind of how our flow is going to go. You're going to hear from speakers. We're going to do a talking circle afterwards, so you'll have a chance to ask your questions. In between the two sessions today, we are going to take about a 10-minute break to give you some time to get up and walk around. We know these Zoom conferences can be long, so we want to make sure you get up and you have a chance to move. We then again, after the break, we'll hear from a few more speakers and then have another talking circle. You may notice that many of these presentations have been pre-recorded, so we will be back on your screens live during the talking circles with an opportunity for that Q&A. So we encourage you to submit your questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen throughout the day, and then we'll answer those questions during that talking circle. For those of you who have joined us for prior Grit and Grace conferences, you know a little bit about the history of the talking circles. But talking circles are also called peacemaking circles, and they come from traditions of Indigenous people of North America, particularly tribes in the Midwest. Circle processes are based upon equality between participants and the principle of sharing power with each other instead of having power over one another. Our intention for this time is that everyone in attendance feel comfortable to share their story and ask questions in an open, non-judgmental format. We really do want to hear from you. These talking circles can be an incredible opportunity for more storytelling and for you to get your questions answered. As an attendee, don't worry, you don't have the option to enable your microphone or your camera, so we won't be able to see you at any moment during this. But if you do want to engage with us, that's when we encourage you to use that chat function again, right at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can select hosts and panelists if you have some technical issues or you need assistance with something. But if you would like to talk with everybody, you can also chat the entire audience. Just be sure to select everyone and say hello. We'd actually encourage you to do that right now. So if you can find that chat function below, open it up, let us know where you're joining from and maybe what encouraged you to join this morning. We would also like to take a moment to thank all of the incredible people who make today's event possible, our 2021 Grit and Grace sponsors. Please join me in thanking. You can use that chat function. Our platinum sponsors, Alkermes and Northwest Women's Clinic. Our silver sponsors, Active Recovery TMS and Cascade Behavioral Healthcare. Our supporting sponsors are MacBo and Rainier Springs. These generous sponsors allowed us to offer this conference again this year for free. So all of you can join us here at absolutely no cost. Our sincerest thanks to our sponsors. If you would like to extend your gratitude, again, go to that chat function and let them know. If you enjoy this day of programming and feel so compelled to support ASHA International and our mission, we hope you will consider donating any amount you are comfortable with. You can visit myasha.org or click the link in the chat. It is true that without the support of our community, we can't do the life-saving work that we do. So our sincerest thanks to all of you who are able to donate today, and even more so to all of you who are just able to join this morning. With that, I would like to now welcome former ASHA International board member and generous supporter of our work, Dr. Saramadi Krishna.
On behalf of Asha International and Asha's founder, Gayatri Ramprasad, I would like to invite you to Grit and Grace, Multicultural Women's Mental Health Conference. As a healthcare provider, I know that 1 in 4 people struggle with a mental health condition. In nearly 2 decades as an OBGYN physician, I have a particularly unique perspective into women's lives. Every day, my patients privately share with me some of their deepest worries surrounding mental health. They wonder, am I crazy? Am I the only one going through this? And what would people think of me if they knew? If I had a magic wand, I would allow each of my patients to glimpse each other's stories. Then they would know that the stranger sitting across from them in the waiting room has been struggling with depression and anxiety her whole life. They would know that the coworker down the hall lives with bipolar disorder, and the acquaintance that they only share a few pleasantries with while walking their dog lost a parent to suicide. They would even know that the doctor sitting across from them could tell stories from her own family. They would hear stories from people of every age, gender, socioeconomic status, race and ethnicity, and sexual orientation, either are struggling with a mental health condition themselves or have a loved one that does. Stories can bring hope and change lives. Stories from people who look like you or sound like you or come from a culture like yours are even more powerful. When your life is echoed in a story from someone that you thought was very unlike you, well, that challenges assumptions. And then we realize how connected we really are in the human condition. At Asha International, we believe that everyone's story is their superpower, and that every time a story is shared, it empowers someone living with a mental health condition to find hope and help. I have had the privilege of listening to some amazing speakers at Grit and Grace over the years and look forward to this year's guest speakers. I invite all of you to also be a link in this chain of hope by checking out our powerful storytellers on myasha.org. This pandemic presents an unprecedented challenge to the mental and physical well-being of everyone in our society today. Yet amid all the pain and the grief and the loss, we are still here showing up every day in our lives and in our communities, burned out but breathing. I am grateful to Gayatri for being a source of hope for all and sharing her vision of a community that rises to meet mental health challenges with kindness and compassion and resilience. I am especially grateful to each and every one of you for logging on today, despite all the challenges in your own lives. Thank you for helping me shatter the stigma and build a better world together.
Oh, it is so wonderful to hear from you, Dr. Krishna. Thank you so much for that wonderful welcoming message and for opening up so much. It truly sets the tone for what's to come for the rest of this conference. And up next, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker today, Molly Vanderworth. She'll be leading a session called The Healing Power of Yoga. Molly will share her personal mental health journey and how yoga has helped her. She will lead everyone in a series of mindfulness and movement exercises you can use at any time to center yourself. If you have a yoga mat nearby or even a towel, you'll want to grab that right now. Here's Molly.
Hi, my name is Molly Vanderworth, and I'm here with Asha to share my story. My story really started back when I went to high school. I was born and raised in Portland, and I went to a private school for kindergarten to 8th grade, but attended a public school for high school, and didn't really know anybody. It was a huge school compared to my private school, so it was really intimidating. I really was focused on making friends more than I was focused on academics at that point. And, things started out with going to parties and trying to make friends that way, and just kind of being as social as I could. So it was very innocent. As a teenager, I think a lot of people like to experiment. You're getting older, you're kind of trying to figure out who you are. And at my high school, it was just very common for people to use drugs and drink alcohol and go to parties. So initially, it did allow me to make a lot of new friends, and that was exciting. I think that for me, being young, I didn't really understand about mental health and just being kind of more predisposed to addiction. And so as I continued through high school, my substance use started to increase, and it became less of a weekend type of thing and more so of an everyday activity for me, in terms of smoking weed, especially. And sometimes I was drinking on the weekdays at school. And it was fun for a while, but it just kind of started spiraling out of control. I felt that I became very dependent on either getting high or using some sort of substance to change my mood, or to, have some sort of social activity that I did with other kids my age. But I started suffering, I think, more so silently, with depression and anxiety. And that was really hard, because I didn't really know what was going on. I'd heard about depression. I didn't really understand like anxiety at that point in my life, but I was dealing with severe panic attacks. And that kind of came in the form of like, I would smoke weed, and then I thought I needed to go to the hospital because I felt like I was having a heart attack. And it kind of like morphed into an everyday hypochondria, of just like feeling like I was sick, feeling like I had, terminal illnesses. I went to the doctor a lot. My mom put me into therapy. My therapist put me on lots of, I would kind of go back and forth on different antidepressants and anti-anxiety, but at the same time, I was still drinking and partying, because that's kind of the friend group that I involved myself with. So it was really hard to get out of that. And especially when you kind of have a reputation of being somebody who likes to have a good time and party and always down to do whatever. And so that was kind of my high school experience. And it went on, until my senior year. I really wasn't doing too good in school. I almost didn't graduate because I was skipping class so much. And I think I had probably maybe 4 weeks before graduation. My birthday was coming up, my 18th birthday, a couple days before graduation. And my dad passed away, I think a week before that. So he had a heart attack and died that same day. So that was just kind of another, you can't put that into words, what that does, So I mean, that really did change my whole life. And still to this day, you know, clearly. But I think because I didn't do well in school, you know, I didn't go to college, so I really was just like at home grieving, and just trying to make sense of my life, because it seemed to have spiraled out of control very quickly. And so that, you know, next 4 years about, I was just in and out of jobs. I was very, you know, obviously depressed. I was still using, you know, maybe not as much as I was in high school, but my coping mechanisms have always been drugs and alcohol. And so, especially with, you know, after having a parent pass away, it just, you don't really know what to do at that age. And later at 22, things kind of got out of control again, and I had a manic episode, and was very delusional, and I was up for days, and I was just not in my right mind, and no one really knew what was going on, but my mom ended up convincing me to go to the hospital. And I went to the psych ward. I don't know if you call it that anymore, but and I was there for probably two separate occasions, but probably 2 weeks total, and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and stabilized, and went to an outpatient program where I was given my proper medication that I needed, and just kind of tried to rebuild my life from there, which, you know, there's so much to that that I could talk about, but within the next, I would say, 4 years, I really got into mindfulness and movement and yoga, and just kind of allowing my body and my mind to reconnect. And I ended up getting certified as a yoga instructor because it brought me so much peace and change in my life, and it helped. It was like an additional tool to my medication. I'm 30 now, and I have not had another manic episode. So, I mean, lots of different tools that I've added have helped make that possible. But definitely, like, getting in touch with my breathing and my body and my mind is something that has helped drastically. And so that is kind of why I want to bring that to other people. Okay, so what we're going to do is just start by taking a deep breath in through our nose, and hold. And exhale through our mouth. And hold at the exhale. Good. We're just going to take some nice deep breaths from here, just normal breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Good. From here, I want you to inhale the arms up and exhale, bring them down to the ground. Now, if you'd like to, you can try and bring that forehead down to the ground, but just listen to your body. If here is fine, let's go ahead and stop here. Good, and exhale, we're gonna walk our hands back up to center. And you do not need to have your legs like this, crisscross applesauce, whatever is comfortable for you. From here, what we're gonna do is bring our right hand to the mat, and then our left arm is gonna go over for a little side stretch. And remember to breathe. Exhale, we're gonna come back and switch sides. Good, and exhale, we're coming back to center. Now this one, let's go ahead and bring the left hand to our right knee. And our right hand is gonna go behind us. We're doing a little twist here. Make sure you're bracing with your core. And if you'd like, if it feels good, turn your head around and look out over that back shoulder. Exhale, we're gonna come back to center. And switch sides when you're ready. Good, and exhale, we're gonna come back to center. Let's go ahead and come to a tabletop position. So we're coming to all fours and we're making sure that our joints are stacked. So we want our knees to be stacked over the hips and our wrists to be stacked over the shoulders. And we're gonna do a few cat-cows. So we're inhaling to cow, maybe look up to the ceiling and stretch those eyes. And exhale, round the spine. It's a cat. Good, let's do a few more. And exhale. Good, we're gonna come to a neutral spine. Place our palms out a little bit in front of us. Tuck the toes under. And we're gonna push up to down dog. And if you'd like to, if it feels good, you can go ahead and pedal your feet. So we'll bend one knee and then the other. And you don't need to have your heels touching the floor if that is uncomfortable for you. Remember to breathe. Good. From here, we're going to drop our knees down and we're going to come back to a seated position. And let's go ahead and plant those feet on the floor. What we're going to do from here is we're just going to roll onto our back. So engage the core and we're going to slowly roll down onto our mats. And let's hug our knees in towards our chest. So if it feels good, what you can do from here is maybe rock from side to side. Good. Exhale. We're going to bring those feet back down to the mat and take our right ankle and bring it to our left thigh for figure four or reclined pigeon. And what we're going to do here is hug that left leg in. So you're putting one arm through that little hole and you're going to be bracing that leg and bringing it in towards you. And exhale, we're going to bring those legs back down. Let's switch sides and hug that leg in. Good. Exhale, bring those legs back down, and we're gonna hug our knees in towards our chest one more time. And we'll take a deep breath in through our nose. And on your exhale, we're going to extend our body straight, bring our arms above our head, and just take a full body stretch. And exhale, let's bring those arms beside us. Okay. What I want you to do is close your eyes and place your hands wherever they're most comfortable, maybe on your knees, or maybe just kind of sitting in your lap. Interlace your fingers. We're going to take a couple deep breaths in. So let's inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth. As we do this, we're really releasing as we exhale. So inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Good. Now, I want you to pick a color. It can be any color, or maybe multiple colors. But it's a color that makes you feel safe, and it makes you feel warm and happy. I want you to imagine that there is a glowing ball floating above your head of that color. And what you're going to do is imagine you have a needle in one hand. And you're going to go ahead and take that needle and pop that glowing ball above your head. And it's going to release and come down onto the top of your head. It's a beautiful color. It might be your favorite color. And I want you to imagine it just engulfing your head and coming down over your eyebrows and your ears, your eyelids, the back of your head, your nose. If you want to, you can wiggle your nose and your mouth and your chin. And I want this color to be relaxing all of those parts. Deep breath in and exhale. And it's coming down to your neck, your upper back, your chest, and your shoulders. And it's just allowing your body to relax and receive comfort and security. It's going down your arms to your fingertips. Let's wiggle those fingertips. Deep breath. It's made its way to your low back and your torso and to your hips. It's coming down your legs, to your knees, to your calves and ankles, and to your feet and your toes. Let's wiggle those toes. You're engulfed in this color, and you're safe and warm. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose and exhale through your mouth. And just see yourself glowing in this color, in your color that you picked. Let's continue breathing. You'll carry around this aura for the rest of the day. When you're ready, I want you to open your eyes. So we're just going to stretch the neck a little bit, maybe roll the shoulders, and check in with your body to see how you feel. And I hope this was beneficial for you. And thank you so much for listening to my story today and doing a little practice with me.
Wow. Thank you so much, Molly. I mean, that was so powerful and so moving. If you haven't had the chance yet to go into the chat, please take a moment now and go read all those amazing comments, those well wishes for Molly. I mentioned in there, I really thought that that ball, that color would be my favorite color, pink. But it was orange. I thought that was really cool. Those are some really incredible tips that people can use in their daily life. It only takes a matter of a few minutes to do some of those moves and give yourself a little bit of grace through the stress of our very challenging days. So thank you, Molly. If any of you have any questions for Molly, she has obviously been through so much and overcome so much. She's an incredible resource. Please make sure you drop those questions in the Q&A. She will, of course, be in the talking circle in just a few minutes. Up next, we have Yamini Rajan. Yamini's talk is called The Healing Power of Art. Yamini's struggle with depression and anxiety began at a very young age. Moving across the world at just 12 years old, dealing with a parent suffering from cancer, all while trying to figure out how to be a normal teenager in a foreign country was challenging, to say the least. However, her passion for art in all of its forms remained a constant mechanism to cope with the anxiety and loneliness that she felt. Here's Yamini.
I left her in front of the TV, and when I came back, she'd copied the exact same tiger from the screen. Can you imagine? She was only 3. My mother's favorite story to tell anybody who will listen involves me, some Crayola markers, and Ethelbert the tiger playing on the CBBS. It was apparently that moment when she knew I'd become an artist, and like any mother would, that drawing was tucked away safely for years to come. While I don't remember that moment as well as my mom does, for as long as I can remember, I've been drawing. Whether that meant creating my own comic books and forcing my parents to read them, stealing my mom's valuables for DIY projects, or doodling in the margins of every notebook I've ever owned, something about the process of creating art gives me a feeling of satisfaction that I've never gotten from anything else. Art for me has been the one thing in my life that just clicks. Growing up in India, surrounded by a culture that celebrates art in every aspect of life, through clothes and jewelry, food, music, religion, dance, and so much more, and with artist grandparents and a mom who deeply instilled the love of local artisans and their work into me, it's safe to say that art was my lived experience. However, things quickly changed when my family and I moved to Portland, Oregon. As a kid, I could never find the words to explain the hollow sadness I would feel, and as I got older, the sadness got deeper and much, much longer. 3 months into our move, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. For a 12-year-old who still hadn't figured out how to assimilate into an American middle school, spoiler alert, it's nothing like the Disney Channel, that was really my breaking point. My thoughts grew dark and I started withdrawing more and more into myself. I watched as my sister asked question after question, 10 years old, trying to figure out what exactly was going on with Mama, while I was so scared to even look at her, because looking at her in her scarf, asleep on our recliner too sick from chemo, would mean acknowledging that the cancer was real, and that was a reality I wasn't ready to face yet. My entire life, my mom had been the most full of life, vibrant person I knew, but the cancer made her weak and tired. and we watched as her hair fell out, and she had to spend hours getting chemo and deal with all the side effects. And we watched her go through radiation and surgery, and then medication, and then wait to see if all of this had even worked. While she never complained or asked why her, I did. I spent nights lying wide awake asking why her. I spent the bus rides to Seattle where my parents would send us almost every weekend, as they spent the days in doctors' offices discussing treatment plans, obsessing over why this was happening to my family. And in a twisted way, it all seemed like my fault. I grew increasingly reclusive and angry. I couldn't understand why I felt this way or how to make it stop. And as I mentioned, I grew up in India, so the concept of mental health was foreign. I had never heard the words depression or anxiety before, and my only experience with mental illness had been watching the media portray quote-unquote crazy people with whom I simply didn't identify with. I turned to self-harm as my method of coping, wearing long sleeves even in 80-degree weather to hide the physical embodiment of my mental state. Reflecting back, in some ways, I think I'd romanticized the idea of self-harm and saw it as another form of body art, as a healthy expression of my feelings. You see, in our culture, we don't talk about these things. I had a family who loved me, a roof over my head. I lived in America, the land of opportunity. What did I have to be sad about? I asked myself these questions every single day, in the bathroom stall, during lunch, as I cut to cope with the anxiety of the day. After I was done, I would wipe the blood off my wrists, pull down my sleeves, adjust the strategically worn bracelets, and walk out with a smile plastered on my face. Much like a lot of people suffering from mental illness, I was really good, almost too good, at putting on a mask to hide my reality. From the outside looking in, one would never be able to tell that it took physical exertion just to lift my head off the pillow and face the world every single day, or that the 15-minute bathroom breaks that I took in the middle of class were actually just panic attacks that I was experiencing almost daily. My parents, focused on my mom's illness, chalked up my withdrawal to just being a teenager. But it was so much more than that. It was this constant state of agony, this never-ending feeling that I needed to be anywhere but here. It would keep me up for days at a time, and when I got sick of lying in bed, I'd sneak out and walk the roads of my neighborhood, sometimes till 3 or 4 in the morning, wishing that the gravel would open up and I would fall through to an alternate universe where I was someone different, living a completely different life. But it never did, and so I sought control over my life in other ways. Cutting was one, but food and eating were another. Starving myself, eating only Tic Tacs for lunch, chugging water when I felt dizzy, throwing up after dinner, obsessively weighing myself. Whatever it was, I did it. And the more I did it, the more I couldn't stop doing it. The ugliness I felt on the inside made me feel so ugly on the outside, and I thought that if I could just lose that last little bit or get a little bit skinnier, maybe I'll finally be happy and everything will be okay. My life would be perfect. I stalked thinspo pages on Instagram and was bewitched by accounts titled Pretty Girls Don't Eat on Tumblr, and as I scrolled, all I could think about was how much I hated myself and how much I hated myself for feeling that way. Eventually, the darkness boiled over, leading to a suicide attempt at age 13. My parents had gone to watch my sister's soccer game. I probably made up some excuse about homework as a way to skip out. I don't remember very much from this day. I don't know if this is something I'd been planning for a long time or how I'd gotten the pills, but all I remember is in that moment looking down at the bottle and making the very conscious decision to take as many as I could. It wasn't until after that I realized I couldn't keep going the way that I had been. I thought about Unthro, my little sister, being the one to find me. What would that have done to her? What would her life look like if I had died that day? I went to school that Monday and told my counselor, Mr. Everson, everything. I thought I'd be told to toughen up, or be called dramatic, overly sensitive, or doing it for attention, the only phrases I'd ever heard in conjunction with suicide. But instead he asked me how long I'd felt like this. And after thinking about it for a couple moments, I responded, "It feels like forever." I sat there in disbelief and embarrassment. I couldn't believe that I had just said everything that I had said, after keeping it in for years. And he responded, "I just want you to know it takes an incredibly brave person to recognize that they need help, and I am so, so proud of you for coming in here today." For the first time since I stepped into his office, I began to cry. That night, as I lay in my bed, pretending to be asleep, I heard my parents come into my room. As they got closer to the bed, they saw one of my arms laying across the quilt covered in fresh cuts. It was the first time in my life that I'd ever heard my dad cry. "How did we not see this?" he asked my mom as tears streamed down both of their faces. I was so ashamed, terrified that I'd let my parents, who had done nothing but love and support me their whole lives, who had moved halfway across the world just so I could have better opportunities that they didn't even dream of having, down. How could I explain to them that this wasn't their fault, that there was just something fundamentally wrong with me and I didn't know why? Therapy was like learning a foreign language for my parents and I. They didn't understand why I couldn't just talk to them. Why did I have to talk about our personal problems and family baggage to someone they didn't know, while I tried to figure out how I was supposed to talk to a stranger about my most dark, twisted thoughts or why that would help me? Therapy wasn't meant for people like us. It was meant for white people who needed someone to listen to them complain because they weren't close to their families. Or at least that's what I'd picked up listening to aunties and uncles talk about so-and-so with a therapist. They always whispered when they said therapist, like it was a dirty curse word that they didn't want to be caught saying. When my therapist told my parents that I needed to be checked into the pediatric psych unit because I was a threat to myself, my mom held on to me so tight I almost couldn't breathe. "I'll watch her all the time. I'll sleep in her room every single night, and we'll get rid of all the medications and the knives and whatever it is that we need to do, but we can't send her away. It's my job to take care of her." It wasn't until my therapist threatened to call Child Protective Services that my parents and I took that drive to Legacy Emmanuel, and I felt like the biggest failure in the world the entire way there. I spent 2 weeks in that psych unit, and my family was there every day during visiting hours to the point where they had to be kicked out to leave. It was during that time that I realized the stress and turmoil that this was taking on everyone else, and I realized that if I couldn't do it for myself, I needed to be better for them. I would say that those 2 weeks were the beginning of my turning point. Music was an outlet for me. I had never really been musically inclined, but bands like Pierce the Veil and Bring Me the Horizon created songs with lyrics that explained exactly how I felt but didn't know how to vocalize to others. Quickly, I became more and more captivated by the world of alternative music, and these musicians became my role models. They spoke candidly about their own experiences as teenagers struggling with mental illness, and within them, I found a community. Something most of these musicians had in common were their heavily tattooed appearances, and I became almost obsessed with their body art. In a way, it reminded me of a more permanent version of Mandi, a type of semi-permanent Indian tattoo. It started off as me just doodling on my palm during class with a pen, but I instantly noticed how creating these repetitive Mandi patterns calmed me down and distracted me. This then evolved to creating bigger and bigger pieces all over my arms with a Sharpie. Soon this became my new go-to. At the slightest feeling of anxiety or urge to cut, I would pull out a marker and begin to draw on myself. It seems small, but in that moment it felt like I had reconnected with a part of me that had been missing for so long. In high school, I threw myself into the arts program, yearning for those 90 minutes where I could just disappear into the art building and forget everything else that was going on. College, however, was different. Overwhelmed by once again having to start over and figure myself out, my art took a back seat. When asked, "What are you working on now?" or "Why did you stop drawing? You were so good," I felt such a deep shame. Embarrassed that I had claimed this part of my identity for the past 4 years, only to let it go without a second thought. I don't know why I stopped drawing. It seems trivial to say that I just got busy, but I guess in a way I associated being an artist as being in high school, and freshman year of college was spent so desperately trying to distance myself from who I used to be. High school wasn't easy, and moving across the country for college was supposed to be my fresh start. The time for me to finally live the life I had been dreaming of living for years. However, life has a funny way of throwing big, altering curveballs when you least expect it. We first heard we would have to move back in October 2019, about 2 months into my freshman year of college. There's a backlog in processing green cards right now, my dad explained to me as we drove to the airport at the end of fall break. In theory, the problem seemed simple. Our visas were expiring, and the hold in the immigration system meant we wouldn't be receiving our permanent residency in time, which meant we would have to leave the US. But the reality of this situation consumed our family for the following 10 months. It meant my dad leaving the US for 3 months in a last-ditch effort to extend our visas, and my mom staying up for nights on end coordinating calls between lawyers and time zones while trying to comprehend complex legal jargon. It meant my sister having to go to school every day knowing that the senior year she'd been dreaming about for the past 3 years would no longer be a possibility. For me, it meant watching my family fall apart while I was 2,000 miles away and trying to balance my life at college at the same time. Every conversation back home revolved around new updates from the lawyers, trying to learn the names of different immigration forms, and trying to build somewhat of a timeline for a situation none of us could possibly control. After months in limbo, moving to Amsterdam was the only solution we could think of, and although it felt like a weight was lifted, my family and I prepared to move across the world once again. Depression for me has always manifested itself in a self-imposed quarantine, whether that meant not leaving my bed for days or the mental barrier between who I was and who I presented myself to be. A part of me has always been shielding itself from the world. As I met and talked to more people dealing with mental illness, it seemed like a common thread between all of us, shutting down parts of ourselves just to get through the day. Isolation and loneliness are some of the most common symptoms of depressive episodes, symptoms that I've grown all too familiar with over the years. However, this time was different. Since COVID had showed no signs of improving, my university decided to move into an online module for the semester, a decision that led me to take a semester off from school just to recuperate from the strain of the past 10 months. At least that was the idea. Fall semester 2020, I felt more reclusive than I ever had before. The uncertainty of this pandemic and having to separate myself from the identity of being a student for the first time in almost 13 years triggered daily panic attacks. Unlike before, when I chose to detach from the world, now I had no choice. Trying to make friends, explore this new city, or anything else was virtually impossible, and there were days when I didn't even leave my bed because I didn't see the point. I could go to sleep for 2 whole weeks and nothing in my life would change, I described to my parents, who, terrified, watched me shut down once again. 3 months into my hibernation, I decided during my 8th hour of mindlessly scrolling through social media that what I needed was a project, something to look forward to wake up to every morning. Thus, my quarantine sketchbook came to be. I committed to trying to fill as many pages of that sketchbook until I had to go back to school, and would spend hours of my day sitting in my room with my supplies spread around me, music blaring, and I'd never felt more like myself. While this didn't erase the loneliness, I was finally creating art just to create it. It wasn't a school project or a grade or a therapy-mandated coping mechanism. It was just me doing something I loved simply because I wanted to. Flipping through those pages now, almost a year later, it's pretty startling to see how different my life is. Each sketch is representative of how hopeless and lost I was feeling, and looking back now, I can't describe how it makes me feel. It kind of goes something like, oh shit, I really did that. Like for most of us, this pandemic was a period of painful self-discovery and growth, leading to me to come to terms with a lot of things that I had spent many years avoiding. But now, as I enter adulthood and my junior year of college with a newfound sense of confidence and self-assuredness, I look back at the terrified, unsure freshman girl who was sent home with no idea what was in store for her, and I can't help but be so proud of her and her resilience through what was going to be some of the darkest moments she had ever faced. As unstable and isolating as this time has been, it's shown me that I can be independent and somewhat okay on my own. Even though the days haven't always been the brightest, COVID has changed all of us in some way, and for me, that's been realizing that the person I've always wanted to be is myself. As I move forward, I have this new sense of hope for the future. Anyone who knows me knows I struggle with control, and more specifically, losing control. I like to know exactly what's going to happen, why it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and who it's going to happen with. I had a plan for my entire life, the next 10 years, a plan for the next 5 years, the next 1 year, the next month, and then also the next week. But if this time has taught me anything, it's that those plans don't matter. I never thought I'd be living in Amsterdam, or take a semester off, or not be friends with people that I thought I'd be friends with for the rest of my life. But plans change. People change. I changed. 4 years ago, if you had told me I would be an Asha storyteller, I would have laughed in your face. But the opportunities this organization has given me since I was 17 years old, meeting the people I've gotten to meet and hearing all the amazing, inspiring stories I've heard all over the world, has been nothing short of healing. I'm an entirely different person than I was in 2017 at my first Asha event. A scared little 17-year-old who thought this would be the first and last time she ever did something like this. Little did I know. This organization, the people in it, people like all of you here today, have given me hope, and I hope that being here does the same for you. If my COVID sketchbook taught me anything, it's that life is too short not to do the things that make us feel like who we are. We don't outgrow them, and they will always be there. So maybe I didn't go to art school and become the famous painter I'd always wanted to be, but I'm still an artist, even if it took me a little bit of time to recognize that. As we grow older, life gets busier, our problems get more complicated, and responsibilities get in the way. But still, I urge you all to find your own version of your sketchbook, something that lets you just be. Maybe it's a discarded hobby from your childhood, or something you've always wanted to try but been too scared to do and didn't. If these times have taught us anything, it's that things can change in the blink of an eye, and all we really have is right now. So as I leave you here today, all I have to say is don't wait. Take time for yourself, and maybe you'll discover a piece of yourself that has been missing all along.
Thank you so much to Yamini, an incredible young woman there who I actually had the pleasure of interviewing probably 3 years ago now when she was still in high school here in Portland. And, she was brave enough to share her story then and to see how the path that her life has taken her on since then. If you're not in the comments, if you're not in the chat, make sure you read some of those comments right now. I mean, people are so proud of you, Yamini, and so much love coming your way to you and to your mom, Minal. It's not easy to share stories like that. And we said this in the chat, but at Asha, we really believe that our stories are our superpowers. We have people tuning in from all over the world right now. And stories like Molly's and like Yamini's make an incredible difference. So if you have any questions for either Molly or Yamini, please make sure you go to that Q&A box right now and put those in there. Again, you can keep sharing your love for Molly and for Yamini and in the chat box. But if you can go to the Q&A and submit your questions there right now, that would be awesome because we are about to begin our talking circle. If you are waiting to press enter on that question, you haven't submitted it quite yet, we do have a little bit of a motivator for you. We have a giveaway. The first few people who submit questions for this talking circle will be entered to win either a My Story, My Superpower t-shirt or a signed copy of our founder, Gayatri's book, Shadows in the Sun. So get those questions in right now if you haven't already. And right now, I would like to welcome Tonya Hall, who will be moderating your questions in the conversation with Molly and Yamini.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here to help moderate this talking circle. And thank you to Molly and Yamini for your beautiful stories of hope and inspiration. So I do have a couple of first questions starting out. The first question we got came in our chat, but we switched it over. This is for Molly. Molly and your cute kitty. Your experience is very moving and inspirational. Thank you for your authenticity and deep sympathy for the sudden loss of your father, which clearly impacted you deeply. Can you share a bit more about your healing journey in terms of your substance use? Did you engage in any treatment around that, or did you weave that work in more organically?
Thank you for your question. I would say that it was a bit of both. I think that after I went to the hospital and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, I went to AA, and I was doing some recovery here in Portland, that it's called Fourth Dimension Recovery, and it specializes with teens and young adults that have experienced substance abuse. So there was a time where I was trying to get completely sober, and did that for a few months. And I think after that, I slowly incorporated having a drink casually, like if I went out to dinner, or went out with a friend, but I made sure that I monitored how many drinks I was having. I think that for me, I had such a like life altering thing happen to me when I had my manic episode and went to the hospital. I really had to start over from there because I I lost my job. Um, a lot of my friends stopped talking to me because they were very unsure what was going on. And I lost a lot of other quote unquote friends, that I was using a lot with. So when I got out of the hospital and I tried, to get sober, I also didn't have as many people contacting me that I had previously used with. And so that really helped. And I just felt like my life took a turn, and I wasn't as interested in smoking weed. I knew that that had to stop. And I wasn't really around hard drugs anymore because I was more isolated after I got out of the hospital. And so I kind of had to like rebuild my life and my friend group, and decided that it needed to be different than it was before. That answers the question.
Thank you, Molly. This next one is for Yamini. This is from Pari. What is one thing that you would like to share with other immigrant and refugee youth that continue dealing with everyday biases and isolation? What is the best way for them to access the resiliency and build on it? And thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest takeaway, like that I kind of understood, especially like a little bit later in my therapy journey, was that I think you have to recognize that not every therapist is going to work for you. I think the lack of representation, of diverse backgrounds and ethnic people in the field of mental health definitely affects how immigrant and refugee youth feel when they're seeking treatment, because it's already hard enough. Like, we have extra sets of barriers when dealing with mental illness and that like road to getting to therapy and medication and hospitalization. But then to sit there and talk to someone who may not necessarily understand or validate your experiences. I remember like I had the same therapist from about 8th grade to my senior year of high school. And while in a lot of ways she helped me come to terms with my mental health and my mental illness and validated my experiences, there were a lot of ways in which she didn't understand my cultural background and understand my family dynamics and the way in which my parents and I communicated with each other and the way in which I saw the world as an immigrant and as a girl of color in middle school in Portland, Oregon. And so I guess for me, I think the biggest thing is to recognize that just because someone is telling you something that, I think the one biggest thing was that my therapist would tell me that my parents were being verbally abusive. But it was because it would be for instances like my parents just asking me why I didn't get a certain grade. And it was that
I didn't understand it at first, but it was her kind of playing into these like racialized stereotypes of, she's coming from an Indian family, her parents are Indian immigrants. They're probably, pressuring her into getting a 4.0 GPA and going to Harvard, which if she had spent a little bit more time talking to me, I've never felt that pressure from my parents. That's never been my experience with academics or my experience with talking to my parents about what I wanted my career and future to be. But, in her head, it was like Indian girl talking about grades with her family. This is like the recommendation that I'm going to make. And it's not a one size fits all approach. I think standing true and like what your values are and what your experience with the world is, even though you're now on this path to recovery, is so important. And I think also just, especially for immigrant youth who are in these like oftentimes white spaces, understanding that even though your experiences are different than other people's, that doesn't mean that they're not valid. And educating your peers on, hey, like this is what I'm going through. It might not look like this for you, but like this is what it looks like for me, can be the biggest like bridge between cultural barriers. So I hope that answers the question a little bit, but.
Thank you. Yes. And then the next question, kind of to piggyback on that, and you answered it a little bit, but do you have any suggestion in talking to different communities about the mental health stigma, especially when there culturally is more stigma around the mental health?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, for me, like coming from a South Asian background, like especially living in India, but even then, like moving to the US, so many of my friends, Indian or not, like Indian, Asian, like so many of my friends were dealing with mental health like issues with like forms of anxiety or depression or eating disorders or substance abuse. And like it was never, we talked about it amongst ourselves, but it was never something we felt like we could bring up with our parents, just because we'd never heard those words in our households before. And so I think for me, once I started doing Asha, and my mom would invite her friends and like members of our family to like these events, we started learning more and more stories of like, actually my cousin was dealing with suicidal thoughts and I had no idea. Our neighbor was dealing with depression and we had no idea. And I think people sometimes, especially in communities of color, have this very like stereotyped negative view of what it means to come forward with saying that you have mental illness because you've already worked so hard to get to where you are, that you're so scared that saying, hey, I'm dealing with this problem can like make that all come crashing and tumbling down around you. Like I remember for my mom, one of her biggest concerns was if I talked to my school about having depression and having anxiety, would it go on my permanent record and would it affect my college admissions? So I think there's so much misinformation and so much fear that can contribute to this culture of silence within people of color. And I think it takes, people of my generation to be like, hey, these are problems that we suffer from. This isn't just a quote unquote white person problem. Therapy is not just for rich people or for white people or XYZ type of people. It's for everyone. And we all are dealing with something. We all have stuff in our lives that makes us feel some type of way. And I think it takes like people coming forward and feeling comfortable in spaces like this, for people to feel comfortable sharing. And I think that's the only way we're ever going to overcome these challenges and overcome these barriers.
Oh, I love that. Okay, next question is for both Molly and Yamini. What would you share is the most helpful thing that a family member can do when you're struggling? Molly, you want to take this first?
Sure. My mom is on here, so she was the biggest advocate for me. And yeah, my family in general was just very helpful. I think that Making suggestions is always a good way to go about things, at least for me. I was never forced to go to therapy when I was struggling in high school. It was a suggestion, and it always came from like a place of love. Like it wasn't ever there's something wrong with you and we need to fix it and you need to go to therapy. It was always just a concerned, loving parent that wanted to see me get better. And so it was always a suggestion of therapy. It was always a suggestion my mom would invite me on walks a lot. I would deny her a lot too, but she never gave up on me in that way. And she was the first one that ever suggested yoga to me. And I don't think she remembers that, but she did. And, I think that it really is just, sometimes I know that addiction and mental health can get to a certain point where people feel like they're enabling the person. And some people feel that they need to maybe distance themselves from a loved one because of that reason. And I completely understand that. But I still feel like at least continuing to reach out and let the person know that you love them and you're always here to support them. I think that was a big thing. No one ever gave up on me, and maybe distanced themselves from me, but never fully gave up on me and always had some sort of a helping hand or suggestion to offer.
Thank you. Yamini, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think like for me, like Molly said, like my parents just like never gave up on me. And like I think it was also while it was like a big process of like transformation and like just learning for me, it was also a huge journey of learning for them because this is something they'd also never, like I'd never heard the word depression, anxiety, or thought about therapy, but like neither had and like my parents grew up in India like their entire lives. So to now come at the age of like 40 something to an entirely different country and then be told by your daughter's school, hey, your daughter needs therapy is scary because it's an entire system that you've never navigated and you don't know the implications. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's also your child. So you're throwing them into this unknown. And it was terrifying for everyone. But I think the biggest thing that I appreciated my parents doing was being willing to say, I don't know, but let's find out. So for your daughter to come home one day with like black eyeliner everywhere, talking, like listening to this like screaming music, and would make any parent be like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? But my parents never judged me for that. My dad would come home from work and like take me to these concerts. And like, yeah, he stood in the back with like earplugs in, but he was still there. He still showed up for me. And was like, if this is what's making her feel better, then like it's important that we invest time and energy in that. So yeah, I mean, I think Molly put it perfectly, but yeah, I think it's just like showing up in however you can and making sure that they feel accepted and loved and that because you're already feeling so much shame as someone who's going through mental illness and like you're already feeling like the biggest failure in the world and that you're letting so many people down, that to be someone, especially your like from your parents and your family, for them to be like, we still love you, we're going to be here for as long as it takes, I think like means the world.
Thank you. Next question is for Molly from Mackenzie. Thank you so much for sharing. wondering, does weed have any adverse effects on bipolar? I was diagnosed with bipolar type 1 in 2007, but prior, almost any time I smoked weed, it didn't help me relax. The paranoia was unbearable, and often I was convinced I was dying. With that, I'm worried whether or not I can safely try CBD products for chronic muscle pain.
Yeah, so that is one thing that I did not know. My doctor told me later after I was diagnosed, I have bipolar 1 as well. Um, he put it as like even people with other mental health disorders, he even mentioned like people that are schizophrenic, have like anxious, depressed, schizophrenic. Um, they have different reactions to weed compared to somebody that is bipolar. And this is just relayed information. I'm obviously not a physician, but I did find out from my psychiatrist that um, there's just a different reaction that people with bipolar have, and it can trigger a manic episode. And I think that that is why instead of it um, having that calming effect, and everybody, whenever I tell people I don't smoke weed anymore, they're like, oh, you haven't tried the right strain. I'm like, no, it just does not work for my brain chemistry. And so it kind of does the opposite effect that a lot of people have with weed. And so I was told that's why I was getting panic attacks. That when I was smoking weed, even when I was manic, that was not, it was kind of furthering that episode. Um, and yeah, it's something that's not super great for people that are diagnosed with bipolar. I'm not too sure about CBD though. I know that is a little bit different, so I would definitely check with your doctor.
Thank you. All right, we have a little bit. I'm going to ask you each one more question. Yamini, one question for you is, did you ever find an art community to help you process the pain is the first part. And then I'm going to go on and tie another question in. Do you have plans to publish your COVID art book that you've been creating?
I think I've always been involved in like some type of art community like my entire life. Especially in high school, I know that sorry about that. Especially in high school, I know that like my art program was so tight knit. It was like only about 25 of us. So we got very close. And that was like a really amazing space for me to like grow as an artist and try new things and get feedback from my peers. And in college, I kind of took a different route and started doing social media management for an org that I'm part of on campus. And that was like a very like it was such a great creative outlet for me to be able to create content and like think of things in a different way, especially because I'd never done like digital art before like that. So now it's a little bit more of just me like drawing and then, you know, like showing it to my friends from high school who are still part of like art things. We do it via that. But I think there's always a community if you look for it. And I think you don't necessarily like the other people don't necessarily have to be like art, quote unquote artists, but I think everyone appreciates art in some way. So yes, I still have some kind of community. And no, I've never really thought of publishing my COVID sketchbook. My mom has been trying to get me to create prints for ages now. But it's never something that I've ever really considered seriously, just because I've been like, it's kind in my head, I'm like, who's gonna look at this? But yeah, it's a great idea. I'll definitely think about it a little bit more. Thank you.
I think you have several fans on this Zoom that would be very interested in it. Okay, Molly, the last question for you is there a yoga workout that focuses on mindfulness, stress, and anxiety relief specifically that you host?
You know, since COVID started and I lost my yoga job, I haven't been teaching since. And I love in-person classes. I prefer to do them If I got enough interest in online classes, then I would be happy to do some, more restorative mindfulness type of yoga. But it just, there's so many online classes right now that I just didn't think I was going to even be able to compete. Um, but yeah, that being said, I mean, I always recommend that, I mean, if you don't take a class from me, to go online on YouTube. And I think that any type of restorative yoga is really great for relaxation and kind of body mind connection. That I think is really helpful if you're not looking for like an intense workout or to get a sweat in, and you're just looking for more of the peaceful side of yoga. Yeah, I just want to address, so I stopped teaching yoga because the gym I was teaching at got shut down when COVID started. And I went on a different career path. I'm working in real estate now, and it's been very, very busy. But I'm looking to get back into teaching yoga now that I'm, 6, 7 months into my real estate career. So, yeah.
Well, thank you both for participating in the Talking Circle and for being brave and vulnerable and sharing. So I just got a little text from Genevieve. I think that we're ready to move on to the next section. So thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Tonya, Yamini, and Molly for that wonderful talking circle. It's really cool to see all the questions that come in as you guys start talking. So, write your questions down, and, maybe if we're able to circle back, we can. Otherwise, you are able to send those questions in the chat. And if Yamini or Molly are able to, maybe they'll be able to answer them outside of this conference. But I want to let you guys know that we're going to take a quick break, just to get you guys some time to move around, maybe get another cup of coffee or get a little snack. But we'll be back at 10:25. So just take some time to get up and move, and we'll see you in about 10 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. So it is 10:25 now. I hope you took that chance to get up, do a little moving, maybe refill your cup of coffee, whatever it is that you needed. Such an incredible first half of Grit and Grace. I'm truly looking forward to the second half of this event. I want to again remind people that, as you just heard, during this conference, we're discussing some heavy things. We're talking about abuse, trauma, suicide, and other topics that might be triggering for some. Viewer discretion is strongly advised, and please know that there is always, always help for you. We said this at the beginning, and I will say it again. There are resources for you, numbers you can text or you can call. We are pasting them in the chat box right now. I strongly recommend that you save those numbers in your phone so you always have access to them. But you can just text the crisis text line. All you got to do is text hello to 741-741. If you are having suicidal thoughts and you'd rather call somebody, you can also use the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That number is 1-800-273-TALK or 8255. Both of those services are free and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So again, those numbers are for you in the chat right now. We're going to get started with the second half of Grit and Grace. And I'm so excited for this next speaker. We're going to talk about the healing power of plants with Linda Black Elk. She will discuss simple and safe ways to incorporate plant foods and medicines into your everyday lives. Linda specializes in plants that offer both delicious flavors and healing medicines. And she uses a lot of plants that many of you can grow in your own garden. Linda will also be demonstrating a very simple medicine making. So if you happen to have these ingredients, you could run to your pantry and grab them, and then you can participate in that medicine making process. But what you would need is 1/4 cup dried rose hips, 1/4 cup dried mint, and 1/4 cup dried dandelion leaves. So if you have those, go run and grab them. You'll also need some hot water and a cup. Welcome, Linda.
Hi, everyone. I'm Linda Black Elk. I'm the Food Sovereignty Coordinator at United Tribes Technical College, which is the tribal college in Bismarck, North Dakota. Now, most of you might not be familiar with the tribal college system, but it's basically an organization of colleges and universities, for the most part, that are on reservations within the United States and a few in Canada. United Tribes, where I teach, is actually off the reservation, but we still serve our local tribal communities here in North Dakota. So I have a really multicultural student population made up of Ojibwe students, Lakota students, Dakotas, Mandans, Hidatsas, and Arikaras. And I'd just like to say that I'm currently sitting on the traditional homelands of the Lakota people and also the Mandan, Hidatsa, and Arikara peoples. So thanks so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to talk to you about plants. I'm an ethnobotanist, and that is just basically a big word for someone who teaches about the relationship between people and plants. And I'm going to share some of that knowledge that I've gained from elders and other knowledge holders. None of this knowledge is my own. It's all been shared with me. And so I'm super honored to be able to share that with you all. So I'm just going to share my screen here so that we can get started. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the healing power of plants. And we have a little activity that I wanted to do with you all, and that is to make an excellent cup of tea, one that's going to be relaxing and healing for you. This is one of my favorite tea blends because it has so many applications and you can just keep it around all year long. As you notice, I talk about the healing power of plants, but I also tell you that a lot of these plants I'm going to be talking about probably grow in the cracks of your driveway, right outside the door of your office. These are really common plants that some people might even call weeds, but you know, I wouldn't call them weeds, because to me, they are amazing foods and medicines. So yeah, let's get started. So the first plant that I wanted to talk to you about, and actually one of the plants that I asked you to maybe have on hand when we started visiting, are rose hips. And so if you see me, I have some beautiful dried rose hips here, and I've already taken the seeds out, and I'll tell you why I did that in a second. But these are dried, air-dried rose hips. Wild rose is such an amazing plant. But the information I'm going to share with you is actually applicable to all of your cultivated roses as well, as long as you don't spray them with herbicides, pesticides, or fungicides. You can utilize the roses and the rose bushes that grow outside of your home or outside of your office building, or you know, the ones that maybe grow in your local city park, as long as they haven't been sprayed. Wild roses actually get, they have a beautiful flower, first of all, that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner where my arrow is pointing here. Gorgeous little, usually pink flowers, sometimes white, sometimes yellow. Have that beautiful rose fragrance that really, unfortunately, has been bred out of like our Valentine's roses, you know, those cultivated roses that you might get in a florist shop. Unfortunately, those actually have the smell bred out of them. And I think that that's half of the reason to love roses. The other half of the reason to love roses is that they also get these gorgeous, as you can see in the bottom right-hand photo, they get these gorgeous fruits that we call rose hips. I don't know why they're called rose hips, but that is the name for the rose berries that grow on the rose bush. I have on my screen here also the Lakota names, just to honor my family. My husband and my children are all enrolled members of the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River Lakota nations. And so I put the Lakota names up for many of these plants. For instance, in Lakota, wild rose is known as Unjijintkahu. And that is actually also, interestingly enough, the name for tomatoes. And I think it's because these cute little rose hips look a little bit like a grape or cherry tomato. but they taste very different. Rose hips taste like a cross between a cranberry and an apple. They're absolutely delicious. But what's more is they are chock full of vitamin C, and more vitamin C than almost any other fruit in the world. Even the citruses don't have as much vitamin C as rose hips do. Why do we care about rose hips? Why do we care about vitamin C? Vitamin C actually boosts our immune system and helps us to fight off infections. So, for example, if you're about to go through surgery, I always have the people I work with drink rose hip tea for an entire week before surgery and an entire week after. And numerous studies have shown that consumption of the rose hip tea will actually help to reduce post-surgical infections significantly. But making tea isn't the only way to consume a rose hip. As you can see in that top right-hand photo, I have a beautiful rose hip muffin. You want to make sure to remove the seeds, but then you can use the red fruity part of the rose hip just like you would any other fruit. And of course, on the left there, I have some rose hip infused vinegar that is fantastic for salad dressings or any other dishes that you want to add a little bit of acid to. But today we're actually going to be using rose hips to make some tea for our tea blend. Now, why do I ask that you remove the seeds from the rose hip? If you've ever broken a rose hip open, the seeds are covered in tiny little sharp hairs. And there are actually numerous sort of like uncomfortable stories about what happens when you eat too many rose hips and you haven't removed the seeds. You can have some discomfort later, if you know what I mean, by consuming too many of those little sharp hairs. So make sure to just scoop the little seeds out and you'll get almost all the hairs out and you'll be totally fine. Now, if you have a lot of rose hips that are already dried and they still have the seeds in them, don't despair. You can still utilize those for tea. You can boil those rose hips up or steep them in hot water, and then you can just pour your tea through a coffee filter or an old t-shirt or some cheesecloth to filter those little hairs out. Okay, so no big deal. But if you're going to eat them, like in the muffin, for example, you'll need to remove those seeds. So don't ever forget about the amazing healing power of rose hips, their high vitamin C content, and how they can boost our immune system to fight off infections. That actually applies, as I said, to surgical, post-surgical infections. It also applies to things like pneumonia. If you're someone who's prone to lung infections, you think you've only caught a little cold, but you end up with pneumonia or bronchitis. Drinking rose hip tea every day at the onset of symptoms can help to prevent those infections. So fantastic plant to have around. Another plant that I asked you to have with you is the universal dandelion. Everyone knows what a dandelion looks like, right? It's just something that grows a lot in our yards and our gardens. Some of you may have even tried to spray the dandelions out of your lawn. And I always think that's such a shame because dandelions are such an amazing food and an amazing medicine. That was actually the original reason that they were grown in the first place. But somehow dandelions have become vilified because of this Western notion that we have to have a perfectly green, smooth lawn. That's a total monoculture. And that actually, just isn't something that should exist in nature. We embrace our dandelions, the dandelions that grow in our lawn. We love them because we know and understand them. So dandelions are like that relative, you may not always want to be in communication with them, but they're still always there when you need them. The whole dandelion is edible and medicinal. So for example, we collect those beautiful yellow dandelion blossoms in the summer and we freeze them. Sometimes we'll dry them too, but we usually freeze them, and we'll have this gorgeous bag of yellow dandelion flowers in our freezer. And then during the coldest, most gray part of the winter months, I'll pull that out and I'll boil those up and make some beautiful dandelion flower tea. It has the aroma and the flavor of honey, and I'll even add a little extra honey in there for some sweetness for my kids. And it's also, you know, yellow, the flower tea from dandelion flowers actually helps to boost your mood and boost your you know, some people who have maybe seasonal affective disorder, things like that, dandelion flower tea helps to boost your mood, and it also makes a delicious tea. You can also use those same dandelion flowers in things like your zucchini bread recipes, and they add a beautiful burst of yellow color in there, and they're fantastically flavorful and sweet and delicious. Dandelion stems are edible. Sometimes to make a low-carb spaghetti, we'll actually get a lot of long dandelion stems and we will blanch them and add them to our spaghetti noodles to make sort of a half regular spaghetti and half dandelion spaghetti. And we just put the same, you know, spaghetti sauce over the top, but we have something with half of the carbs that we would normally have. It's fantastic. And my kids don't even notice the difference. Dandelion leaves are totally edible and medicinal. I've asked you to have some dandelion leaves with you today. I actually have some dried dandelion leaves in this bowl, beautiful, dried them earlier this spring. Simply just harvest them, lay them out on some paper towels, put a fan on them if you need to, and they'll be dried in a matter of a couple of days. But dandelion leaves are fantastic in salad. If you see in the bottom left-hand corner, that's actually some sauteed dandelion greens that have been cooked up in a little bacon fat. Yeah, one of my favorite things. I always say bacon is the great equalizer, and you can cook anything in bacon grease and it'll taste pretty good. In the top left-hand corner, those are actually dandelion flowers that have been fried, dipped in a little cornmeal, and then again, fried in some bacon grease. They're super delicious as well. And in the bottom right-hand corner, we actually have some dried dandelion root. Now, some of you may have had dandelion coffee before, which is a fantastic coffee substitute made from roasted, dried dandelion roots. Dandelion root coffee is fantastic. It's decaf and it has the flavor of chocolate and caramel. It's wonderful. But did you know that dandelion root is also an amazing medicine, just like the leaves? Dandelion helps to lower and stabilize blood sugar. It helps to lift your mood if you're not feeling, you know, if you're having a little bit of stress or anxiety, dandelion will help to lift your mood. It's also fantastic and is being used. It's super high in antioxidants and is being used to treat numerous types of cancer. You can actually look up really fantastic articles about the fact that dandelion helps to shrink tumors. And also helps to get people through chemo much more easily. So it's a fantastic tea to give to people who may be experiencing cancer. So, you know, just a wonderful medicine. And it's amazing to me that we vilify it so much and get rid of it because it's there, you know, it's always there for us and it just has such a multitude of uses. So we'll be adding those dandelion leaves to our beautiful tea blend today. The last plant that I asked you all to have with you was some wild mint or some mint, maybe just some of the mint from your garden. Maybe you collect wild mint like we do. It's a very important traditional plant and ceremonial medicine here in the Dakotas for many indigenous people here. So we collect wild mint, this one that's on the left side of your screen, Mentha arvensis. We collect that every year. But if you have a bunch of catnip growing in your yard or garden, gather that and dry it too. It's also a wonderful medicine, even though it's extremely common. I actually do have catnip growing in the cracks of my driveway. It just grows everywhere around here. And, you know, I'm always thankful for it because it's such a wonderful medicine. And I actually have some that I collected this spring. So I have a bowl of dried catnip right here. Oh, that beautiful minty aroma. I just love it. But a lot of people don't know that mint and all the mint family, I'm someone who has asthma. So I drink mint tea regularly to strengthen my lungs and keep them clear. All of the mint family actually helps to loosen up congestion, whether it's in the sinuses or the lungs, and it helps us to it thins that stuff up to help us get it out more effectively, so it works as an expectorant. But also it helps to strengthen our lungs so that we can fight off infections, and we can fight off those asthma attacks. If you're someone who's prone to allergies, the mint family is great for you. And of course, again, as many of you probably know, mint is super relaxing, okay? So I'm gonna show you guys how I make my tea blends, and it's the easiest thing in the world. This is a very simple tea blend to make because it's equal parts of each plant, about 1/4 cup, okay? And I'm not one to measure super carefully, but I have my jar right here, and I'm gonna take my dried rose hips and just pour them into the jar. Try not to make as much of a mess as I'm making now, but get it into your jar. The catnip, pour that into your jar. And our dandelion leaves into the jar. I have all 3 of them in there. You can use any size jar you want. Normally I make much larger blends, so I usually use a quart jar like this, but it's totally up to you. It's just equal parts. Then I'm just gonna close it up and give it a shake. And voila, we have an amazing tea blend right here that's going to boost our immune system, strengthen our lungs. It's going to help us relax and be able to meet the world. I have this in the morning. I have it in the evening. There's no caffeine in it. So it's just really wonderful. I have it in the middle of the day at work. It's just, oh, and it's delicious because the rose hips are in there, giving it that beautiful sweetness. The mint is in there, adding that gorgeous flavor in there, the catnip. And then the dandelion leaves are in there to boost our mood and help us to boost our immune system as well. Now, I wanted to say that dandelion, and I didn't say this earlier, is actually fantastic for your liver. So if you've ever been told that you're at risk of fatty liver disease, start incorporating dandelion tea into your diet every day. Okay, it's good to incorporate into your diet every day. Or for those of my sisters out there who travel a lot, have you ever been on a plane for a few hours and your lower legs end up getting a little swollen? You have a little bit of edema in your lower legs. You can actually drink dandelion root tea, and it'll help to get rid of that excess liquid, because dandelion can actually be mildly diuretic. So you want to make sure to drink lots of fresh water as well. But yeah, this is the tea blend for you. I think it's such a great one to have around. So let me show you now how I'm going to make the perfect cup of tea. First of all, there are all kinds of tools you can use to make the perfect cup of tea. If you go online or in some of your local tea shops, you might see one of these. Isn't that a gorgeous little tea strainer? And it makes everything so easily because you can just put that down into your jar and scoop up about 2 teaspoons of your tea blend. Okay, have my tea blend in there, about 2 teaspoons, and you'll just add that into your teacup and pour your hot water over it. Isn't that wonderful? It's that easy, and you don't have any tea bag to throw away. So those are great. They come in all different forms, those tea strainers. They come as a tea ball like this that opens up. It has a little locking mechanism. So you can put your tea blend right in there, close it up, lock it. And then it has a hook on the end of the chain that will actually hook your tea mug or your coffee mug or your teacup, whatever you have. So it'll hook on there and it'll stay on there, right? So those are great. You'll also find some that have these cool little designs up at the top. This has a leaf. Someone gave it to me, you know, because it's plant related. It's cool. But this is a tea strainer. Do you see those little holes in there? So what you can do here is actually put your tea blend in here and use it exactly like you would any other tea strainer. Put it in your mug, pour your hot water in, and when you're done steeping your tea, just pull it out. I usually steep my tea for about 10 to 15 minutes. Isn't that great? So I'm actually, before I talk to you more, I'm gonna actually make myself a cup of tea. I put about 2 teaspoons of my tea blend in here, okay? And I'm going to add it to my mug. Then I'm gonna pour my hot water over it. Beautiful. Okay, and now I'm just gonna let this steep for probably about 10 to 15 minutes so that I can drink it and have a really great, healthy day, relaxing day. While that's steeping, I wanna talk to you about a few more plants that are really common and ones that you can find around your yard, your home, your office, wherever you live. So this is one of my favorites. Have you ever been walking, you know, maybe near a wetland, you know, maybe you live near a pond or a lake and there are cattails everywhere. Most people know what a cattail looks like. If you've ever been doing that and you see a beautiful purple flower, spike flower growing in among the cattails, maybe you've seen blue vervain before. This is one of my most important self-care plants, you guys. You know, it's not like it's like a powerful anti-anxiety herb, or it's not like it's like a powerful de-stressing herb. The way that I describe the feeling that blue vervain gives me is that, you know, anytime I'm feeling like off center, right? You know, I'm just feeling a little like, okay, things just aren't right. I'm having a nervous or stressful day, or I just don't know how I'm going to get through this day kind of day. I will drink blue vervain tea. And, you know, sometimes I'll even add it to the tea blend that I just made with you all. So what I'll do is I'll collect the leaves or the flowers or both. I'll dry them, and then, you know, I'll add them to any of my tea blends. And I always say that anytime I'm just feeling a little bit off, it just helps to bring me back to the center. And I'm able to say to myself, okay, I got this. I can handle this, right? This is my, you know, I can handle this tea. And you know, blue vervain is super safe. I even give it to kids who maybe are having a bad day, or like when one of my kids has a major exam coming up and they're really nervous and they've been up studying and they're really stressed out. I give them blue vervain tea because it's such a wonderful, safe, gentle tea to always have around. So blue vervain, don't forget about that one. I also wanted to talk about hops and that beautiful Lakota name, Cha'iwe, which means that it climbs and circles around things because hops grows as a vine. And it gets these beautiful little paper like lantern looking flowers on them that you can see in these photos and drawings. And it's very, very common. It's probably growing on a fence in your neighborhood and you don't even know it. But this is my go-to if I'm experiencing, you know, I'm having a really tough week or a tough time, and I'm experiencing some insomnia. I'm not able to sleep well. And that happens to me really often to where, you know, I wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and, you know, I'm going to have to be up for a 7 o'clock meeting over Zoom. And, you know, I really need to try to get another hour or two of sleep. What I'll do is I will actually get up, put some hops into some hot water, let it steep for just a few minutes and drink that tea. And I'm able to go right back to bed. I've had friends with really, really terrible insomnia who've had it for years. They try their first cup of hops tea and they say, oh my gosh, you know, I've found it. I found the thing that's going to help me sleep. And, you know, very often once you get back into a better sleep cycle, you don't even have to drink the hops tea anymore. Sometimes if I'm feeling really stressed and really off kilter, I'll actually mix that blue vervain with the wild hops, and they make a fantastic tea combination. Okay. So that's a really fun one to have around. Chickweed, I really love to talk about this one because it's so common in people's gardens and lawns. You'll just see it kind of creeping everywhere, and you'll see that beautiful teeny tiny little star flower like you see in the top left-hand corner. You've probably had this in your flower beds and you didn't even know that it's an amazing edible plant that you can actually chop up and, you know, make some chickweed fritters like we did up here, or much, you know, more interestingly, you can actually make chickweed oil. You can buy it. It's a little bit expensive online, and I've never understood why people would choose to buy chickweed oil rather than make it. But maybe you don't live in an area where chickweed grows, or maybe you don't live, you know, in an area where you feel safe harvesting it, or you haven't learned to identify plants completely yet, and you need a little bit of time and identification assistance. That's totally fine. You can actually go to a number of vendors online, or you can go to your local herb shop and you can find some chickweed. Now, why would you want to use chickweed oil? Chickweed oil is my go-to oil when people have issues with fibroids. Now, they can be fibroids like fibrocystic breast tissue, or maybe you have a fibroid on your ovary or your uterus that's bothering you, or that's causing some pain, that's causing some inflammation, maybe that's even causing some fertility issues. Chickweed oil has been shown to shrink fibroids and fibrocystic breast tissue significantly. It's a wonderful, wonderful oil to keep around. All you have to do is add a cup or two of chickweed to a crock pot, pour some olive oil over to it, over top of it. So let's say if you were using 2 cups of chickweed, you would use 4 cups, like double the amount of oil. Just, you know, like some good olive oil. Doesn't have to be extra virgin, but I always like to use organic olive oil. And then put that in a crock pot and let it sit overnight. And then in the morning, turn it off, strain it, and you have chickweed oil. That's all it is. Okay, that's all it is. It's chickweed, olive oil in a crock pot overnight, strained, and you got it. And that's fantastic. You could do 6 to 10 drops 3 or 4 times a day. Super safe, super easy, and you can also eat it. Okay. Another plant that many of you have probably seen growing around really commonly is pineapple weed. A lot of people actually know this as wild chamomile. And did you know that we actually have wild chamomile growing all around us? It'll have these, you know, it drops its petals very quickly. It'll have little white petals, but it drops them very quickly and leaves these cute little yellow cones everywhere. And it grows down very close to the ground. You won't normally see it taller than a few inches tall, but it has a gorgeous smell. If you pinch that little yellow cone and smell it, it actually smells like fresh cut pineapple, and it has the most beautiful pineapple scent that you can drink as a tea. You know, it has the same relaxation properties that you get from cultivated chamomile tea, but you know, this is a beautiful wild one with much more of a pineapple aroma, and you know, you can actually use that. This is pineapple weed flan, you guys. Oh my gosh, right? Can you imagine a beautiful flan that's scented with pineapple? Oh, beautiful. And that same flan would actually be relaxing. You could eat it before bed. That'd be awesome. I want that flan. So pineapple weed, just wonderful tea. Incorporate it, mix it with your blue vervain maybe for some relaxation and centering. Mix it with your wild hops so that you can, you know, have a really good relaxing night of sleep. Wonderful and so safe. This is Cleavers. It's a really common plant that a lot of you might have found in your gardens, and you might find it super frustrating. I once had a friend say, I can't believe that Cleavers is edible and medicinal, because she could literally scoop up an entire armful because it was so common in her flower beds. It had actually taken over, and it's very sticky. Another English name for it is sticky willy, because the cleavers are, the plant is so sticky. You can see those fun sticky little hairs all over it in the bottom left-hand picture. And it'll actually, the reason they're called cleavers is because it will cleave to your clothing. But cleavers are an amazing medicine. And in particular, I've found that for women of color who are experiencing an underactive or overactive thyroid, like for thyroid issues, cleavers help to regulate thyroid function. So if you start using cleaver leaf oil in the exact same way that I told you, you know, put a cup of cleavers into a crock pot, pour 2 cups of olive oil over the top, let it sit overnight, and strain it in the morning. That cleaver leaf oil, like you see in the bottom right-hand corner there, is wonderful for regulating thyroid function. And you can use that one fairly often. You could use it 3 to 5 times a day, every day, just 6 to 10 drops at a time to regulate thyroid function. And I have found, especially among Indigenous women, that an under or overactive thyroid is very, very common. And you know, that's true in general for women of color, but you know, it's become a really big issue. If any of you have been, you know, diagnosed with Hashimoto's, you know, any of those thyroid, those issues that affect your thyroid, start incorporating some cleaver leaf oil into your life and you'll see some benefits from it. Okay. All right. So I'm going to cover one more. This is my most favorite plant to have around. This is nettles, otherwise known as stinging nettles. As an ethnobotanist, I get asked all the time, if you could only have one plant in your life, what would it be? Or if you could only take one plant to the moon with you, what would it be? And unequivocally, my answer is nettles. It's such an unassuming looking plant. It, you know, it doesn't get showy flowers or anything like that, but it just has such a multitude of amazing uses. You know, it's great for thinning hair. So if any of you have been having issues with thinning hair, we always say, you know, a lot of Indigenous people say that after you have a baby, sometimes they take some of your hair for their own. And basically what that means is, you know, our hair starts to thin sometimes after we have children, maybe if we're going through menopause. Incorporating nettle into your shampoos or finding a shampoo that has nettle in it can actually really help to regrow your hair. I just put this one down as an example. This pine tar and nettle soap is actually a shampoo bar. There's also a beautiful Indigenous owned, Lakota owned company called Ha'i Pajaja Pejuta, and I promise that I will spell that for you guys when I'm meeting with you in person so that you can have access to it. But they have a gorgeous nettle shampoo bar that has actually been shown to help regrow hair. So nettles are wonderful for your hair. They're wonderful for people who have any type of inflammation, whether it's arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, whether your sinuses are inflamed due to allergies, nettles are your friend. Now, they do come by their name very honestly. If any of you have ever come in contact with nettles in person, you know that they really do sting. In this top left-hand photo, you might be able to kind of see some of those stinging hairs along the stem. And those actually, we were always taught that if you pick nettles barehanded, you'll never get arthritis as you get older. Just allow them to sting you, and the sting will only last about, 15 minutes or so for most people. And you might get, some of those little raised bumps on your hands, but we call that a medicine delivery system. And it's wonderful for, any kind of swelling. You can use it on your knees or your hips. I played a lot of sports when I was young, and anytime that my knees start to hurt, I'll actually put on a pair of shorts and go run through a nettle patch, and I'll be pain-free for weeks. So nettles are wonderful. You can also use them internally. Now, as a tea, as you can see, that's a beautiful nettle pesto in the top right-hand photo. Why would you want to eat something that stings you? Well, with any cooking or drying or quick blanching, all the stinging effect goes away. So you can absolutely eat young nettles. I prefer them at the stage in the bottom right-hand corner when they're nice and tender and delicious. And they make the perfect pesto. I stuff them into ravioli with some ricotta. You can, just do all kinds of things with nettle. You can even throw them into soups. And that's actually a very common soup in Europe, to have a beautiful, spring tonic. They make nettle soup, right? That helps to clear their system. It's just, an absolutely wonderful plant to have around. Beautiful medicine, beautiful food. So yeah, that's another great one to have around that I hope you guys will all check out. Well, I'm going to stop my share here. So that I can say to you all that I'm so honored that you've joined me today. I hope you got a little bit of information out of this talk. I know that I shared a lot of plants with you. If you have questions, please feel free to contact me by email. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram. I'm always happy to answer your questions about any of these plants, about how to make the perfect cup of tea, or I can, hopefully answer some of your questions after this talk. Thank you guys so much, Wopila, for joining me, and have a really great day.
Okay, wow. I think my grocery list just grew exponentially. Major cheers to you, Linda. Thank you so much for teaching us all of that, and for helping us find better alternatives to coffee. Can actually help us more throughout the day. Really appreciate you. Linda's been amazing answering questions in the chat box. We want to remind you that if you do have any other questions for the Talking Circle specifically, please get those questions into the Q&A box. And then Linda will be able to answer those during the Talking Circle, which is coming up soon. So thank you again, Linda, for that really informative segment. That was fascinating on so many levels. We now have a great talk from Donna Hardiker. She is going to be talking about the healing power of work. Donna will describe her experience of navigating mental health challenges while being at work, off work, and returning to work, and how she came to develop a methodology of considering human needs at work as a way of understanding ourselves and each other better.
Welcome to the Healing Power of Work. My name is Donna Hardacre, and I am so happy to be talking to you today. And before I begin, I'd like to invite you to take care of yourself. Maybe when you heard about this talk, you thought, oh, this will be interesting. And as I'm telling my story, you begin to think, oh, no, this is not a good day for me to be hearing this kind of a story. Now, I'm not going to be doing anything, dramatic or anything like that. But even just the nature of hearing this kind of story about real struggle inside of a workplace, it just might not be good for you. Maybe something's going on for you today. Maybe someone close to you is struggling. So please just take care of yourself, whatever that means. And perhaps you just close your eyes and just listen. You don't have to see me in order to hear the story. Perhaps you want to get up and walk around, and that's really good for you to do anyways. Maybe you want to just sign off completely and re-engage with this material another time. So when I deliver this talk in front of a live audience, I ask people just with nod of heads, do I know that, I have your commitment to take care of yourselves? So I'm going to imagine that that's what you're doing. And I'm also going to take care of myself as I'm delivering this. I have a throat condition that actually has resulted from a couple of years of chronic stress. And so every now and then I need to actually take a deep breath and just relax my throat so that I can continue to talk. I may also take a sip of water. So you'll also see me taking care of myself. And we have a mutual commitment that that's what we're going to do for ourselves today. So the pandemic, as everyone is likely quite aware by now, it has escalated and exacerbated some common experiences. my story, of course, is unique to me. It has universal truths inside of it and many, many common experiences. And those experiences are now highlighted, even greater than they ever were before, because of the impact of the deep disruption that's happened to all of us. What I'm hoping that we can do is consider this massive disruption as an opportunity to think about many things differently, including the entirety of our working experience. My vision is that working can be a source of belonging, meaning, harmony, and health for everyone. So as I'm talking, you can listen certainly as an employee, a working individual. Everything that I say applies there. You can also be listening as perhaps a supervisor of people, a people manager. Perhaps you're a decision maker. So you can also listen with those ears. How does this story apply in terms of making decisions for your organization? So I tell my story because I'm lucky. I'm lucky that my life partner, my husband, is still with me. Our marriage survived this terrible time in our lives. I'm lucky that my children are doing okay. They were young teenagers at the time, and essentially I abandoned them, emotionally abandoned them. I am lucky that I was able to reinvent myself professionally very quickly. I was lucky that I had access to services and treatment. I am lucky that I knew how to advocate for myself, even though I was so unwell and the struggle was so profound. I figured out how to advocate for myself. And I'm lucky because I have tremendous privilege. And when I think about this, I reflect that we shouldn't have to rely on luck. We all need better systems around us. And this is a time when we can be thinking about that, thinking about the systems that surround us. So I was working in a job and a career that I loved. I was a rising star in a very dynamic education program, highly productive. I was very creative, very engaged, and I was promoted, very quickly promoted from a casual employee to part-time into a full-time staff position in a unionized environment without a competition. So a lot of strings were pulled, rules were broken, but I loved it. It was great for me. And within 2 years, I was in the doghouse. I was completely socially isolated. I was struggling. I was miserable. I made everybody else miserable. It was a nightmare. And I truly believe that the whole nightmare, the nightmare for me, for my family, for my coworkers, for my manager, for all of us, it all could have been prevented. And inside of how I view this is that I didn't have any awareness of my working conditions. I didn't have thoughts about what is this thing called work? What is it that I'm doing when I go to work? And going to work applies whether we're at home working virtually or whether we actually physically are going into a workplace. It is still going to work. And I had no concept that when any of us go to work, we step inside of systems. The systems are, some of them might be working well, but a lot of them aren't. And a lot of them are like unconscious, informal systems. And I came out of this whole experience thinking from a systems perspective. And I think that that's part of that is the key for all of us to think differently. So the working conditions that I experienced were not uncommon to many, many workplaces. We were chaotic. So we had very little organization around meetings. We didn't take minutes. We didn't have agendas. It was quite sort of by the seat of the pants. And there was even a culture where that was valued. We thought, aren't we great? Because we always pull things out of the fire. And it was interesting. And at the time, I didn't enjoy it, but it was okay. I could manage. I could deal. I personally had very few limits or boundaries around my time. So the person I most closely was partnered with, she would pick me up. We would drive into work and we would talk about work the whole time. Then I'd do the full day of work. She would drive me home and we would continue to talk about work. And then she would call me in the evenings and we would keep talking about work. So I didn't have an understanding of not doing that because I was so interested in the work. I was so excited to be doing this amazing job. And I was happy to be working with her. But that was another red flag that I wasn't aware of at the time. Like many workplaces, there was hierarchy. And inside of hierarchy, some people have more power than other people. And I was at the bottom. And it was interesting having to witness the power that people have when they are formally higher up in the hierarchy and the impact it can have on others. We were told often that our work was going to dry up at any time. We never knew. So we were told, don't think you have a job for life or even a job for the next few months, because we never know if our projects are going to be pulled, they're going to give the work to somebody else. So there was a culture of fear there. One thing that happens when you're very successful at work is that you get more work. So my workload doubled over the course of a year without any additional resources. And we also had a culture of favorites on our team. And so I was just keenly aware. And of course, I was the favorite. So as the rising star, this was just something that was great for me. And I, of course, thought it'll never happen to me. What I do see happening to other people being thrown under the bus, I thought, well, that's never going to happen to me. And I also had a private office with my coworker with whom we were doing a lot of the project work together. And we could close the door to the office. So we kept out a lot of the noise and chaos, but we moved into a cubicle environment. So very, very open. And of course, now no privacy. I couldn't control noise. I was right beside the kitchen and the busiest path. So a lot of disruptions, a lot of interruptions. And there was always the smell of burning coffee, burning popcorn, and burnt toast. So it was, I navigated and managed this. And I noticed, and I was aware enough to notice that I started to get kind of crabby about all these things. I started to, what I know now was the beginning of burnout. I was grumbling when a new problem would emerge, and that's all that our job was. It was to solve a multitude of problems. And instead of rising to the occasion and going, great, I get to apply all my skills, my tools, my knowledge, I get to apply them to the new problem. Instead, I had a grumbling, an angry, a frustrated response. I started to have bad dreams where I was just constantly working on my workplace problems while I was sleeping, and I was tired. So this was already starting. And then I was in a car accident. I had a moderate whiplash injury, and everything that I had already been experiencing, it's like it all just exploded. Every single thing that had just kind of bothered me a little bit before now was escalated. I changed, my behavior changed. So I went from being the person who was easy, agreeable, excited, fun, one of the social connectors. I was one of the social glue people on our team. I went from that to be angry and irritable. I was having panic attacks. I was crying at my desk, and I was binge drinking more and more. I had had a drinking habit prior to this, but then after this experience, and as things got worse and worse and worse, my binge drinking increased. And everyone at work stopped talking to me because I was suddenly now no longer a fun person to be around, no longer easy to get along with. And it began with my manager. My manager literally stopped talking to me. And everyone else followed suit. So these were good people. Every single person I worked with was smart, generous, a really, really good person. And yet nobody knew what to do. We had no way of talking about what was happening at work. We had even no way of talking really well about work itself, about the structures and systems and processes. We didn't talk about that. We just sort of came in and did it. And when everything started to fall apart for me, we had no way of responding well. And when I think about this from a risk factors perspective, I had all of them going on. I had a family history. So my father had experienced depression for a significant part of his life. I had childhood trauma myself, of sexual abuse, significant sexual abuse in my childhood. I had a lot of personal stress going on at this time, including like a lawsuit in my family, including some very difficult deaths of people who were really important to me. I had workplace stress that I've just shared some of what was going on. And there's an emerging factor in the literature that's telling us that social isolation is a risk factor for developing a mental health condition. And I was now socially isolated at work too. So what I knew, part of me knew I needed help. And I started to reach out for services. I went to my doctor and I kept going repeatedly because I had the neck pain from the whiplash injury until eventually I said to her, you need to screen me for mental health. And she did. And she said, oh, it looks like you have depression. So that's the diagnosis that was settled upon. But it actually, I'm suggesting, doesn't actually represent my full experience. I view my experience through the lens of trauma. Everything that was happening to me at work was traumatic. The loss of the relationships. It was a physical trauma that happened to me with the whiplash injury. And I also reached out for counseling with the employee assistance program. And I had to make up a new problem every 3 visits because there was a cap. And so it was effective, but not that effective really, because we couldn't have good long-term care for me. So even though I was going to the doctor, I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, I was taking medication, nothing was helping at work. And I ended up going off work because I was so incapable of being well and being happy and being productive at work. And while I was off work, I began to notice what I was missing. And it's interesting because even though work itself was so stressful for me and full of so much pain and difficulty, I actually wanted to be working. And that puzzled me. So this is when I began to think, well, why do I want to go back so badly? And it's because work gives us so many things more than just the income. It gives us identity. When you are working and someone says, so what do you do? Which is a very common question that we get asked. You meet someone at a party or some kind of social situation to get to know you better as a person. You're asked the question, so what do you do? And when you're not working, for whatever reason, it's really hard to have a word, a term, or even to describe like the profession or something, because even say you are a nurse or a teacher, and you're not doing that, do you actually say that? Do you say, well, I'm a nurse, but I'm not actually really that because I'm not, like, it's very difficult. How do you identify? Work gives us activity. So something where there's some predictability about the thing you're going to be doing on any given day. Work gives us sometimes meaningful contribution. It gives us routine. So it's that reason to get out of bed. And work gives us social connection. We spend more time with the people we work with than the people we love and live with. More waking hours are spent with the people at work. And we need those social connections. That information informs us that we belong. It informs us of who we are as a human being, as a social creature. And we get it from the people we love and live with. And we also get it to a huge degree from the people we work with. So when I went back to work, it was a very difficult time. And I struggled. I continued to struggle. Now, by this time, though, I had access to cognitive behavioral therapy. And I was able to have some sense of regulating my emotional responses. But it didn't help because all of my workplace relationships had deteriorated so badly. And I asked for mediation because we were communication skills specialists. So it's a bit ironic as I say that. And I asked for mediation because I kept thinking, we can figure this out. We can do this. I love this work. I don't want to give up this work. And I could envision being back in the good graces with all of my colleagues because we were a fun, fabulous group of people. And when we were sitting in mediation and I had described my experience and everybody else had described theirs, the mediators said, oh, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have, this is what they said to me. Donna, we're going to have everybody sit in a circle and they are all going to tell you the impact that your behavior has had on them. And I had a moment of change there. So my moment was, I realized if I do that, and if I sit and listen to all of their anger and their rage at me, that I'm not going to make it home. Because throughout this whole time, every day, all day, I bargained with myself for my life. I thought about suicide every day, all day. Everything I did was either closer to suicide or protecting myself from suicide. So I had this constant narrative going through my mind that I could die. I could just avoid all of this pain, all of this struggle. I could just die. And it's in that moment, I also knew, wait a minute, I don't want to die. Like, I don't want to die. And it was a huge moment for me to have me say to me, I don't want to die. It was fabulous. It came from a place of such desire to connect to meaning, connect to hope, connect to the positivity in the world. And it's like the scales fell from my eyes and I saw, wait a minute, this is just a job. So I then applied my cognitive behavioral therapy skills to doing my resume. And I was able to do that because the problem was while I was trying to write my resume, I would have panic attacks because I would be thinking, who would possibly want to hire me? I'm a horrible human being, according to all my coworkers. I was really struggling with productivity. I was struggling with mental clarity because I had a lot of mental confusion at this time. It was getting better with the medication and with the therapy, but it was still taking time. But I did my resume and I was able to send it out and I quickly reinvented myself. I was hired by the Canadian Mental Health Association to work on their new program for training people in workplaces on workplace mental health. And my story became part of the training. So now I am a public speaker. So, and this all was happening very quickly. And I wasn't well, but I had incredible support at work. I had a strong set of colleagues around me who knew everything that had happened to me, and they were kind and caring. I had a great manager who understood that from time to time I needed to adjust the way I worked or my work schedule. And things were starting to get really, really good. I was still drinking heavily. And it was another year before I got good help for that. And that's actually an example of the deeply fragmented system because I was doing cognitive behavioral therapy with a psychiatrist. And when I said to her, I really want to work on the role of alcohol in my life, I need to figure out how to not be so dependent upon it, how to not have it control me. And she put up her hand and said, I don't do addictions. So that's a problem with the system. I eventually, because now I was working in mental health, I knew about an addiction program, and I started there. And it was ironic because a lot of what we did was cognitive behavioral therapy with addiction information and supports inside of it. So that's when I believe my recovery truly began, because I now had good work where I was able to meet many of my human needs at work were now being met. And I was able to start having my well-being as a concept for myself. And certainly it's an ongoing process. This is not something that I ever say, I'm recovered. I never say that. This is something I'm always having to be aware of. And so what's worked for me is decreasing the negatives and increasing the positives. So each of us is very different. So what works for me in terms of increasing positives will be very different than for other people. And the same thing with decreasing the negatives. And while there are some universal truths that certainly we know that it's really important for people to move their bodies. So physical activity is important, nutrition, eliminating substances that alter mood like alcohol, caffeine. So managing caffeine, having good sleep hygiene, like we know these are all true. And all of those play out for me too. There's other things that are specific to me. So I'm very careful about who I invite to be in my life. And I'm a social butterfly. I love people. I'm an extrovert. I love that. And I began to realize that it's actually not best for me to have a lot of social contact. It's best for me to be really noticing where my energy goes, where I get energy and where I lose energy so that I'm not depleted anymore. I am very careful about having quiet in my life, a lot more quiet than other people might have. So it means I've also limited a lot of the things that I do in terms of producing, because quiet is very important for me to maintain a sense of calm and regulation in my body and in my mind. I've had many types of therapy, and the latest one that was incredibly helpful for me was called brain spotting. And with brain spotting, I have learned and have adapted many really helpful behaviors to help me with that regulation, to get me that if I am escalating or deteriorating in terms of my mood, I am able to regulate and get myself back into stability again. I also truly value giving back. So sharing my story is part of giving back. I have become involved in peer support, and peer support is a fascinating world in which we who have a history of mental health struggles, we receive training, and we are then able to connect with other people who are just a little, not as further along in their recovery as we are. And it's the idea of being side by side with someone who's been on this path, who understands the challenges, who is able to say, hey, I'm one of those people who has struggled with mental health, who has a history of a mental health condition. I'm one of those. So it cuts through the stigma. I also have contributed my story to the development of training so that we can change what happens in workplaces. And I really think about things like some key questions I ask, like, why did this happen to me? And the thing is, whenever I have told this story, I have people lining up and they come to me and they say, you're telling my story too. So that is a very interesting question for me. So what are the root causes of all these types of struggles? Not just mine, but also everyone I was working with. What's root cause inside of this? What could we all have done differently? How could our work have been organized differently? How could we have been managed differently to prevent harm to all of us? So when we look at the value of work in our lives, we can think about those social determinants of health and why it is crucial for us to be thinking about work, not just doing it unconsciously. We can be more mindful about the actual act of working. And one of the systems I like to use is human needs at work. So this is the idea of looking at things a little differently so that we can understand ourselves and perhaps each other better. So things like considering when something happens, how does this affect our sense of achievement or maybe alignment, autonomy, belonging, clarity, growth, harmony, integrity, recognition, safety, self-efficacy, and support. And all of these human needs at work are important. All of them, to varying degrees, will be met or will be not met. And we can think about our struggles inside of this lens, and it helps us, I think, get more connected to the idea that having work matters, absolutely. And what happens to us at work matters. And that's because our human needs at work matter. Social support matters for all of us. Our unique experience inside all of this matters. So we can think differently about this thing called work. We need much more than screening. We need much more than getting people into services, which are of themselves fragmented, difficult. We need much more than just reactive measures. It's about looking at this through a holistic lens, culture, community, social responsibility, and even public health. And by offering the gift of your time and attention with me here today, we are beginning to make real the vision that working can be a source of belonging, meaning, harmony, and health. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you so much, Donna, for sharing all of that with us. I know there are so many of us who struggle with work-life balance and trying to manage work stress among life stress and other things. And you can see that in the comments. There are a lot of people resonating with what you're saying, a lot of people who are dealing with what you dealt with at this very moment. At the beginning of last month, I had to take a week off of work, which is unheard of in my career. And we don't always prioritize ourselves. So thank you for sharing that. We do have one more speaker, and then we're going to get to that talking circle. I am thrilled to welcome Shell Thompson, who is going to be discussing the healing power of sport. She will share her story on how sports became the outlet for her to deal with traumas she experienced in her childhood. And she'll tell us how sports provided a safety net for her to channel her emotions, but also how she used those emotions through sport in a way that propelled her in a positive direction.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Oh my goodness, it seems like it was just yesterday that I was here with you guys. And that's a good thing because I really enjoy spending time with this community, and I'm super grateful for the opportunity to be able to share my story with you today. Like, words cannot express the gratitude I feel. I have this huge, this enormous sense of gratitude for life, for opportunity, for health, for connectivity and relationships, for laughter, for purpose, and especially sports. If it weren't for sports, I would not be working for Nike today. If it weren't for sports, I wouldn't be a two-time Hall of Famer. If it weren't for sports, I wouldn't be a WNBA champion. If it weren't for sports, I wouldn't be an international athlete. If it weren't for sports, I wouldn't be an All-American. I wouldn't be a 4-time state shot put champion. If it weren't for sports, I wouldn't be an undefeated basketball player as a middle schooler. If it weren't for sports, where would I be? No one knows. Only one could imagine. If it weren't for sport, I wouldn't be who I am today. I've been able to be introduced to so many people throughout my career. You've heard how sports have changed the lives of people, saved the lives of people, and that's true for me too. But the bonds and the relationships that I've been able to build, women who I to this day call my sisters, through sports, I've made these connections. I've been able to travel the world, across the globe, immerse myself in different experiences and different cultures, just because I was participating in sports. I think about the delicious food in Italy and the beautiful people in Italy. A big ciao to my Italian teammates. The beautiful beaches in Spain, beautiful people in Spain. Hola to my Spanish teammates. The Holy Lands in Jerusalem and Israel and the beautiful people there. Shalom to my my Israel teammates. And then the beautiful people in Turkey. I was introduced to chai tea in Turkey. Merhaba to my Turkish teammates. I've been able to meet celebrities, which was really cool. I'm going to name drop here, but Whitney Houston. Some amazing experiences, some fun adventures, and I'm grateful for them all. But I'm especially grateful for the healing and the growth and the development and the evolution that I've gotten through sports. So today I'm going to talk about the healing power of sports. And after today, I want you to walk away with three things. Number one, I want to change the outlook that you have on sports. I want to show you how sports can help you in your own growth and development, evolution, and your own healing and mental health. And then number two, I want to be able to help you to identify activities in sports that you can do in your own time for your own healthy release and mental health. And then number three, it's all about giving back. I want to show you how you can use sport as the background or the platform to be able to reach back and heal and inspire the next generation. So how many of you have been angry? Show of hands, right? And you've gone on a run. And after going on that run, you felt so much better. Show of hands for people who have been sad and you've taken a kickboxing class or a boxing class, hit some things. And after that class, you felt re-energized. What about anybody who's felt anxious or anxiety and you've decided to go to a yoga class, and after the yoga class, you felt calm and centered and balanced because you were able to connect with yourself? Frustration, anybody? Been frustrated and you've gotten on your bike and you've ridden around in your neighborhood or gone and just looked at the scenery in your city and the frustration just dissipated? What about a bad breakup and you decided to go for a long walk and just immerse yourself in nature and connect with Mother Earth and left with a sense of peace? I don't know about you, but I've been through all of those things, some of them multiple times. And sport was my way to heal and to cope and to get through. So I'm going to tell a story. About a month ago, I went to the gym. I wasn't having a bad day or anything, but wasn't 100%. I had some things on my mind. I was processing my emotions, just really paying attention how I felt, and decided to do the one thing I'd done my whole life. I'm going to work out. So I go to the gym, scan in, and had already in mind what I was going to do for this workout, which was I was going to lift some weights and do some cardio, hit the heavy bag and box a little bit, get on the stair mill, whatever it was. It's going to be high intensity because that's just how I roll. But upon scanning in my badge, I decided, man, I haven't been to the basketball court in a long time. I think I'm going to go up and just put up some shots and let that be my warm-up today before my workout. And as I'm going up the stairs, this excitement just came all over me because I hadn't literally shot a basketball in about a year since the world closures and everything. So as I'm getting close to the gym, the excitement's growing. I open up the door to the gym, and the smell of the hardwood floor from the basketball court just hit my nose. It was like, oh my gosh. So I walk in, I put my things down, picked up the basketball, just feeling basketball in my hands, felt good. And then I took that first dribble, the basketball hits the floor. Oof. And there was a smirk that came on my face. I walk over underneath the basket, and with as much finesse as I possibly could, shot the basketball, aiming at the backboard, of course, aiming at the square, watched the ball go through the net. And it was like naturally, my shooting routine that I had done my entire career just started coming back to me. I started moving around the floor, going to all of my spots, and literally hearing the coaches that have gone through this routine with me in my head talking about the technique. I was like, okay, no more backboard shots. I'm going to swish this one. So I shot it, and the sound of the ball going through the net, swish. I literally let out a chuckle. Grabbed the basketball, put the ball between my legs, made that screeching sound with my shoes against the court. And if you're a basketball player, you know all about that screeching noise. Like you feel like you're really doing something when your shoe screeches across the basketball court. Instantly, I was transported back to my childhood. I was pretending that somebody was guarding me. 5, 4, 3, 2. I shot the basketball. Swish. 1. Thompson wins the game. Yeah. And just like that, I had forgotten why I had come to the gym. Like the reason why my mind was gone, my emotions, all out the window. I was transported back to Southside Park, Big Lake, Texas, in my hometown. That same park that got me in trouble because my mom told me to be home before dark, and I never made it home before dark because I was playing basketball. That same Southside Park where I have memories of a 5-year-old, my Uncle Bobby, taking me to the court and making me dribble backwards and forwards, left hand, my right hand behind my back, right hand, left hand behind my back. It's a vivid memory. That same basketball court where my WNBA dreams were born. And that same basketball court where I would go to release my anger and my frustration and my sadness and my grief. And just like when I was a kid, on this day, those feelings dissipated. I had a feeling of accomplishment and confidence and playfulness. And most of all, I had a feeling of joy. That is the healing power of sports. By the time I looked at my phone again, 3 hours had gone by. I had set up the machine that's called the gun. It rebounds and passes the ball back to you. And I was in there for 3 hours. Not even remember why I was off balance when I went there. So I grew up in a home full of discipline. My mom was a disciplinarian. She was strong on values and morals. And just like every other kid in America, we had chores we had to do. Had to clean my room, make my bed, wash my own clothes, fold my clothes, do yard work, pull up weeds, pick up trash, all of that stuff that we don't like to do as kids. And I thought my mom was a drill sergeant. That's actually what we called her. And I didn't understand back then, but it was until I got older where I understood my mom was teaching me responsibility. She was teaching me to value the things that I had, to keep my place tidy and clean, and to respect my belongings. She was strong on giving 100% in everything that she did as a single parent. I mean, we were a team. When she was at work, it was me and my brothers, my older brothers. And I had to listen to them, which I must admit I did a horrible job at. Don't judge me, but I was a bad kid. I was a bad little sister. I was stubborn, I was hard-headed, and I hate being told what to do. I got in trouble a lot for it. But she taught us how to work together and how to get along. Taught us the importance of just resiliency and accountability and work ethic. And not only did she ask this of us, but she showed us this. She was the prime example. You guys have heard me say before, but my mom was a great teacher and a mentor and a coach, and in my eyes, the consummate leader. Expectations and the standards were high in schoolwork, housework, spirituality and faith, relationships. So I grew to take these values as a kid and really lived my life making sure that I paid attention to this. But it was sports. Sports was the actual classroom. It was the playground where I got to put all of this into practice. I got to understand what it was like to be a good teammate, what it was like to have a good work ethic and to be determined and self-motivated. It's where I found my character. I was my happiest when we were running in the street and playing games and having rock throwing contests. Like, we competed with everything. Who could jump the highest? Who could jump the farthest? And years and years and years of sport gave me the opportunity to cultivate and to nurture and to grow and to hone these skills that I bring into Nike today. Now, my manager told me he picked me 2 years ago for his team for these same skills, my leadership skills. I can teach you the business, he said. That's the easy part. I can't teach you everything else. I remember my mom coming out there and playing with us sometimes, and us just having a good time laughing at each other and just having so much fun. And so the bonds and the relationships that we were building through sport, that's the healing power of sport. So now that you see how sport can develop you and grow you, we're going to move to the next step, which is identifying which ones you like to do. And let me start off by saying, you don't have to be an Olympic athlete. You don't have to be the next Usain Bolt or FloJo. None of that. Just have to find something that's fun for you. And I think we can all say that sports itself has evolved over the years. I mean, you see skateboarding that's in the Olympics now, dancing. What brings you the most joy? Kickboxing, martial arts, Tai Chi, capoeira, judo, gardening. Is it competitive sports? You know, competitive sports, you got to be careful there, because if you're going to the gym and you're playing team sports and you're being competitive and you end up being mad the whole time, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? Individual sports like golf or tennis. I'm actually a self-taught tennis player. I used to go up to my high school courts and hit the ball against the wall. Taught myself how to play tennis. It made me feel better when I left. But if you're playing an individual sport and you're going to be hard on yourself and judge yourself, that also defeats the purpose. This is all about fun. There's so much to do. Kayaking, snowboarding, water skiing, jet skiing, hang gliding. I think you get the point. There's a lot to do out there. You don't have to pick one thing or pick multiple things. You can pick multiple things. It's up to you. You can try some you may like, try others you may not like. And that's okay. Who's rushing here? If it's playing catch in the yard with your kids or having a water balloon fight, you get to define what sport is for you. I'll tell you this story. I was going through a breakup one time and my emotions were all over the place. And so to handle my emotions, I went for a run. I want to tell you right now, I am not a runner. I was a sprinter and a thrower in track and field. Anything past 200 meters, that was too long for me. But on this day, I went for a run. And 8 miles later, that's how long it literally took for me to get balanced again. I was paying attention to my breathing and my feet hitting the pavement and paying attention to, the scenery and the people that were around me. And it was through running, after this 8 miles, I decided I'm going to sign up for a half marathon. I mean, even the people who knew me were like, what? You hate running? Yes. And I finished this half marathon and I felt accomplished and super proud of myself. But I also discovered parts of myself that I hadn't known before. Through my pain, I started to enjoy running. That is the healing power of sports. And so as you begin to try these activities, you do something that makes you feel good. You do something that's fun. That's the most important thing. You can have a friend join you, make it a team thing, or you can go alone when you feel like you need that space. You know, I don't want anybody to be around me. I just need to be alone, whatever it is for you. And then lastly, we talk about the next generation. So after my playing career, I decided to become a personal trainer, basketball trainer. I did some sports performance training. And there's this young lady that I started training. And after a little bit, her parents were like, can you please come coach our AAU team? I'm a basketball player, but I never wanted to coach. Never wanted to coach kids. And they just kept going and kept going. So finally I agreed to it. Of course, it ended up being a very fun experience. We won games. We were quite successful. I grew a lot, learned a lot about myself. Just so much fun. Some girls on the team then asked me to come and coach at their school. Coach T, please come coach at our school. Please come coach at our school. I never wanted to coach, and I sure as heck never wanted to be a school teacher. Never on my list of things to do. But after much pushing, didn't have a degree in education, so I had to get certified, go through that whole process. But long story short, I ended up getting certified in physical education and ended up getting hired up at their school. I mean, they really pushed for it. So I had a lot of support. So get the job. My first year, I was actually an in-school suspension teacher, ISS teacher. And then the next year, a PE teaching position opened up. And you guys know high school kids, they do not like to exercise. It is the generation of technology, and the only exercise is them working those thumbs on the phone. So I go into this class, and not only did I have kids that didn't want to participate in exercise, they were expecting me to pass them and give them a good grade for not exercising. So remember, I come from the school of my mom, Patricia Thompson. I'm not having that. You have to work hard for everything. If you want it, you have to earn it. So the expectation for me to them was, you guys are going to participate if you want a good grade. And then if not, you're going to fail the class. You have to suit up and you have to actively participate. So it was important for me not to just talk to them about the importance of sport, but to show them the importance of sport. And little did they know, Coach T is a big kid. I was probably going to have more fun in the class than them. And I knew it was going to take some time, but I was willing to put in the work, and I knew it was going to have to be creative with the games that I came up with. So we did it all. Dodgeball, battlefield. We had those pool noodles. We played noodle tag, and that just really gave them the opportunity to hit on me and me to hit on them. Like, it was just so much fun. And I had a mix of different students in my class. I had some kids who grew up around sports, some kids who never played sports a day in their life. And then I had some kids who had played sports but had a bad experience and quit. So I had to change their outlook again on how sports could be fun and play could be fun. Went outside, we played relay races, we did everything. And it was beautiful and amazing to watch the transformation of these kids go from angry, depressed, sad, isolated, to thriving teenagers who loved and supported each other. We chest bumped and high-fived and hugged, and they looked forward to talking about the games we were going to play next. It was beautiful. For my basketball athletes, it was about coming to practice, leaving all of your emotions and anything that happened from first period to seventh period, we leave it at the door. I want this to be a safe place for you to come and just have fun, play basketball. It was difficult at first, but 99% of the time, by the time athletic period was over and they had to go back and revisit what they were angry about from second period, they didn't even remember. I had my partner Farah come in. She did yoga, meditation with them, and they looked forward to it. So now I'm watching these young ladies who were always fighting each other and jealous and having behavioral issues in classroom and at home. Parents coming to us saying, "What are you guys doing with them? Like, this is, my kid is different. She's happy, she's smiling more." Setting the expectation of respect. And then they looked forward to it. Coach T, can we meditate today? Coach T, can we do yoga today? Such a beautiful thing to see. And so the important thing, other than just teaching them how sports could be fun, it was also showing them that it's not always about winning, but it's the lessons that we learn from the wins and the losses. It's those same lessons and skills that got me to Nike. It's the same lessons that will help them to land their role, whether it's at Nike or somewhere else, or even if they decide that they don't want to work, at least they know that they've been empowered by sport. At least they know that they can give back through sport, just as I've been able to do. You know, my mom always said this to me, and I quote, "You know, Shell, basketball is just the platform for you to do bigger and better and greater things in life." When I was young, I never understood what she meant. Now I understand, because it's through my professional experiences as an athlete that I get to be on this call with you guys, that I get to connect with my kids. Like I had my little entourage walking around the school. The kids I played basketball with, they thought it was cool. It was a WNBA player. They were like my bodyguards, my guys, and then my girls, they were just on my hip. Like, it helped me to build these connections and these relationships that I will never forget. Still keep in touch with some of my kids. The kids need us. They need great coaches. They need amazing mentors. They need people who aren't going to yell at them, especially our ladies. You know, females drop out of sport twice the rate of boys by the age of 13. They don't have fun. We have to reshape and reinvent what sport means to them, and then let them define it for themselves. If it's kicking the hacky sack or throwing rocks, whatever that is, as long as it's enjoyable for them. And then letting them to understand that they can take these lessons. These are lifelong lessons that they will always carry with them. And as they play the game of life and work, it's playing the game of collaboration. It's playing the game of support and encouragement and inspiration, of hard work and practice, and especially resiliency, of purpose. Our kids need sport. They need us. We need sport. We all need sport and can benefit from it. So in closing, I want you to change your outlook on sport. How can you develop from it? How can you help the kids to develop from it? How can you heal from it? How can it be a healthy release for you? Number 2, identify what that is. Remember, there's a lot of things to do out there. As long as you're not hurting yourself or other people, and you're having fun doing it, that's sport. If it gives you joy and happiness, peace, that's sport. And then lastly, of course, giving back to our kids. Showing them that it's not about the wins and losses, but what we learn from them. How to play in the game of life. We're all playing in this bigger game of life. And with that, as you choose for yourself, I wish you the best of luck of finding what sport means to you, of finding fun for you. And more than that, I wish you peace. I wish you happiness. I wish you love. I wish you joy. And more than anything, I wish you a whole lot of fun. Thank you so much for listening. It's a pleasure being here with you guys. Peace and love. Thank you.
This game of life, I absolutely love that. Thank you so much, Shell. We appreciate your beautiful story. We've had some incredible speakers this afternoon, or not quite this afternoon, I guess it's 12:01, but just before then. Let's welcome Shell, Linda, and Donna back for the talking circle. This time it's going to be monitored by Sandy Wilburn. We've already got some great questions coming in, but keep submitting them, and I'll let the four of you take it away.
Thank you, Genevieve. Wow, what an incredible day it has been already. And I am so honored to be here and amongst our presenters this afternoon. So I want to start off with a question for all of you. We've been, experiencing pandemic for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. So we know, as you've all discussed, work, sports, that connection to plants and nature can make, re-engaging with life in ways that other forms of healing cannot, can make that re-engagement in life really healing and spectacular. And so in thinking about that, as we begin to emerge from nearly 2 years of pandemic, can you please share with us, what has sustained you and what you hope will nourish you as we move forward? And we'll start with Shell.
Yes, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I think for me, it's just really relaxing into the present moment and being in the flow. So often we stress and we have all of these emotions over things that we can't control, and that just makes life a little bit more difficult for us. So it's just releasing that control and surrendering into the moment and understanding that everything is just in its divine timing. And the more that we can just be the bamboo or be like water and not resist the changes that come, I think that it's a lot easier on us as a whole.
Thank you, Shell.
You're welcome.
And Linda?
So I really think that connection of, with Mother Earth and with getting outside and, taking deep breaths outside, being in touch with the plant nations, literally hugging trees. I mean, all of those things, it's so important. And that has kept me so grounded and so connected. And, I know during a time when a lot of people were actually afraid to leave their homes, a lot of my friends and colleagues were experiencing so much depression and anxiety. But, when they just got outside and, started getting some of that good vitamin D, it really helped to alleviate a lot of those symptoms. So, I really highly recommend that even in cold weather, getting outside can be really beneficial. So I know it has been for me.
Thank you. And Donna?
I fully agree with Shell and Linda that so certainly flow, certainly reconnecting with nature. I think we can use this time of significant disruption to truly step back from everything that's happening in our lives. And I've done that this past year, and I've come to the conclusion that what I want is to have a life where I am in choice. And even if there are conditions in front of me that are not of my choosing, I can still be of choice in terms of how I react to them, how I respond. And of course, this means that I focus a lot on my own stability, my mood stability, my health stability. And so therefore, this intention I have of being in choice means that I have to focus more intentionally on my own well-being and what that means. So I think that we can do that on our lives outside of work, and we can also do it on our work lives. And we're seeing this in the world. It's called the Great Resignation. People are quitting their jobs in record numbers now, especially in North America, because I think it's because we've been offered choice now. We've been offered different ways of even looking at how we put the thing called work into our lives, and we are questioning it. So I think questioning everything that we do so that we can be our best selves. We don't have to be stuck in a rut. We don't have to be inside of negative processes. We can stand outside of them and be curious about them. So I think that's a place where we can begin.
And what a great place to begin. Also, all three of you have really great answers, and I just love each of them. And Donna, we'll stay with you for a minute. A question from Brianna. What do you think of grind culture? And Brianna says, I think this relates to a work culture that asks us to mute our human needs.
Yes. So grind culture, highly competitive cultures, cultures in which we value the output, not the process of the output. So where we tend to chew people up and spit them out. My heart breaks when I even talk about this because it's harm. And I am hopeful because there is actual research evidence showing organizations do not benefit in the long term when they have these kinds of cultures. I'm hoping that this time in our lives will demonstrate that the grind cultures are going to fail. And they should be failing. We shouldn't be sheep inside of grind cultures. We shouldn't be doing that because chances are we're hurting our bodies or we're hurting our families. Because we will bring that home. We will bring the stress and strain of that home. So this is a time when we can be questioning, what is the social responsibility of employers? And there's a lot of work being done in Canada around this in the realm. It's called psychological health and safety in the workplace. And there's a whole field of study that's demonstrating that organizations benefit when they pay attention to the psychological health and safety needs of their people. And it becomes part of the way they do business, which is that we do not rest happy if we are constantly causing psychological hazards to our people. And we focus on psychological protections for our people. And we figure out, how do we do our business? How do we do it better with these considerations in mind? So I'm hoping that what we will find is that individuals will no longer accept grind culture, and organizations will begin to realize this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense from a moral perspective, because moral injury is occurring when people are inside of a grind culture. And that employers can recognize either from that perspective, the moral perspective, or from the business perspective. And nowadays, they might not be able to get those people. They might not have the leverage there, because people are now recognizing, hang on a second, I have choice.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting that we always have a choice. I want to go to Shell now. Shell, you spoke a lot about the importance of giving back. And actually, each of you have touched on that. And you're doing that today, and it's very much appreciated, as seen in the chat box. How does giving back feed your soul?
I love to see people happy. I love to make people happy. I love to see them smile. And for me, it's just the heart that I have, honestly. Like, it brings me such joy to help others to develop and be their better selves. I've always been that type of person as far as leadership and just really impacting change and making positive influence. For me, growing up in a very small town, I didn't have access to some of the things that I have access to now as a collegiate athlete and a professional athlete. And so it's really important for me to, as I live my career out and my life out, to look at those little girls who are in the same position, or those kids, little boys that were in the same position as me, and the valuable lessons that, yes, they may be learning them at home, maybe not, but the platform of sport, what I found through teaching and working with kids listen to athletes. They just think it's really cool that you play a sport. And so I really use that as a connecting point to it's important for me to show these kids that there's more out there. There's more than what you see inside the small city limits of your town, or even if you drive 3 or 4 to 5 hours, like there's a whole world that could be ours, and opportunity and connection if we seek it. And so that's why it's important to me. It feeds my soul because I give kids hope for a better future for themselves if they don't have access to it. And then also, I mean, it gives them also a view on how they can impact and give back and promote change in their own lives as well.
Thank you. And I would open that up to Linda as well. And I'm doing that because I became aware of your Facebook presence and what you do on Facebook and your Facebook community. So how is giving back feeding your soul?
So that's, very much a cultural norm among Indigenous people. Giving back is such an important aspect of our lives, giving back to our communities, to our families, to ourselves even, and making sure that we're taken care of is so important. And what I have truly noticed, and I know everyone says this, but I don't know if people really believe it, but truly, the more that the more that we are involved in our communities, and the more that we give sustainably, right? We don't want to hurt ourselves and our family, and I think that there's something to be said about the situation of where you give too much, but when we give, with good hearts and just enough, we really do get it back 4 times. And so that's what, like, my husband's people, the Lakota, they really believe that everything that you give, you get back 4 times that. So I've really found that to be literally true. So
That's beautiful, really beautiful. Thank you. Donna, did you want to add something?
Sure. What I love both what Shell and Linda have both shared. I think for me too, it's about making meaning out of significant loss. So I lost that job and that career. I had to step away completely, and it still hurts actually. I loved that work so much. And so to be able to do the work I do now through public speaking or through peer support, I find somehow inside of myself, it's like I don't embrace the notion of everything happens for a reason, because there's no way that works for me. But what does work for me is, how can I learn from what happened, and how can I make meaning? And so for me, if I'm able to help someone else in their time of pain by giving them some hope, demonstrating some support to them, and because of this had happened to me, and I have some insight and understanding, and have focused on my own recovery, that maybe I can offer something to someone else, it has helped heal me in a lot of ways if I'm able to help someone else.
Thank you. And there are a lot of questions here for you, Linda. So I want to try to consolidate them a little bit. There were some concerns about whether there were any contraindications with the herbs or teas and medicines that folks get from their doctors that folks need to watch for. And then there's a question about whether you have other recommendations for plants that might help folks dealing with cancer.
okay, so about the counterindications, I it's interesting because I find Western medicines and Western ideas of what's dangerous and not dangerous to sometimes be really interesting. For instance, one of our most important traditional foods is the chokecherry, Prunus virginiana. But if you look at any Western field guide, it'll say they're poisonous. And I just always think that that's so odd. And I think, that comes down to them not understanding Indigenous science and ways of knowing and understanding the world and ways of processing. But it is important to talk about counterindications. The thing is when I chose those herbs to talk to you all about, I made sure that I was talking about herbs that were incredibly safe. You know, dandelions are an important part of the everyday diet of a lot of people and cultures. Blue vervain, I use that for children, like even young children as young as, 3, 4, 5, who are experiencing ADD, ADHD, and things like that. Nettles are incredibly safe. We eat nettle pesto. I mean, we, use it in our pasta sauces and eat it from the time that we can first eat solid foods. I did see that someone had mentioned serotonin and interactions and maybe an overproduction of serotonin. None of these herbs have that issue. You really need to worry about that with things like St. John's wort and ginseng and things that contain lots of tryptophan. So even like, eating a lot of turkey can sometimes cause you to produce too much serotonin, but not with any of the ones that I talked about. I think it is important to think about that. And of course, I always advise people to talk to their doctors, but I tried to keep that list as safe and as gentle as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to address the cancer herbs real quick. So when anyone tells me that they're dealing with cancer of any kind, obviously they're all different and we use different medicines for the many different kinds. But what I almost like when I hear it, I always start people immediately on powdered dandelion root in a tea, and you actually consume the dandelion root and the liquid. You do not strain the dandelion root out. And I do the same thing with chaga mushroom. We have to be careful there because some people over harvest chaga, but if you can get some sustainably harvested, it is the combination of powdered chaga mushroom and powdered dandelion root are wonderful to just start people off. So I just wanted to say that really quickly, and you can contact me for more info.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And Shell, the mind, the body, and the soul, they all heal at kind of their own pace, and that pace needs to be respected. So, what advice do you have for someone who is just starting or is in the middle of their healing journey and they're finding it just so challenging?
Just give yourself some grace. It's going to take time. We're very complex, and there's layers upon layers upon layers of healing that needs to be done, especially if you have traumas or experiences that you've held on to. And so it does take some time. You have to align all of those three: mind, body, soul, and spirit. And you may spend some time, working on one area. Right now I've done some, a lot of my mental and spiritual work, and now I'm focusing on my physical body. And so you may jump in between those. You may work with them all together. But I think that's probably the most thing, is just understanding that it's a process. It's a long process, and it's a never ending process. If we're living, we're going through the process. You get rid of one situation, and then you have another situation that you have to encounter or an obstacle. And I think it's just understanding that that's life. It's ebbing and it's flowing. And, there's no rush. There's no rush.
Thank you. Donna, I see the wheels turning.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's a constant work in progress. I am a constant work in progress. Every single one of us is constant work. And on a really difficult day, and when you've had many, many difficult days, and it feels like there's no way up, there's no way out, everything is dark, listen to people like us who are talking. Listen to stories of people who have been there and who have come through, who are willing to go there again. I don't know what life is going to hand me. I know now at my age, I have many, many, many more skills and tools, in my toolkit than I used to have. But I could still have some very difficult episodes in front of me. It could still happen to me. And if I'm in those difficult times, what I do is I find even small things that give me hope, get me through the next 15 minutes. That's okay, because then commit to the next 15 minutes. And if 15 minutes is too long, do it for 5 minutes. Just stay alive for 5 more minutes. And 5 minutes beyond that, 5 minutes beyond that, reach out to one of the helplines. Text. You don't even have to speak to another human being. You can just text with somebody, and you will hear words of support. You will hear someone who's going to validate being alive is a good thing right now. No matter what's going on for you and how you're feeling about your life, being alive is really good right now. And it'll be good in 5 minutes and 5 minutes and 5 minutes. And before you know it, there will be a period of time then when that 5 minutes will expand. It will expand naturally because your heart, your mind, your body have allowed for life to come back in. So it's really important to hear the positive messages of people like me, people like our other speakers, because our world is full of negativity and incorrect messages about what we're supposed to be feeling and doing in the thing called life. Very incorrect. So truth happens with people who have spent time thinking about their stories and then sharing their stories, and we connect to positivity. And another group that does this is the Stability Network. So we are all people who have histories of mental health challenges. We are all working professionals, and we tell our stories publicly. So you can also just Google that and listen to more stories. And I've heard a lot of people tell me that by reconnecting to multiple individuals who are telling their stories, it's given them that sense of hope and that sense of just calming down and taking it easy, like the way Shell said, like just chill around it, just gentleness and ease, and it will get better. I promise you it will get better.
Thank you. Linda, would you like to add to that?
So the question was?
The question was around the mind and body and soul healing at their own pace.
Right. Yeah. So, the thing is we live in a culture where we try to rush everything, but that's why plants are really such a great example for us to follow. And we really do think of the plants as our relatives, like as literally as our relatives. And we learn so much from them. And one of the things that we learn from them is patience, right? I can't make a flower bloom tomorrow, right? They bloom on their own time. And, we really need to think of ourselves that way. We will bloom in our own time, and we can't force it. We can't rush it. And when it happens, it's beautiful because we have worked hard on being patient and waiting. And so, I really suggest that people watch the Plant Nations and learn from them and, take their advice when it's given to us.
Thank you. And we are nearly out of time, but after you all talked about taking your time, quickly, what's one thing that you wish everyone was doing for their health? One thing. Donna?
One thing. Stepping back from assumptions. If we step back from assumptions we make about ourselves, about other people, and it allows for us to be curious, that I think is an essential first step. And it can be part of well-being. It can be part of becoming active again, like the way Shell has described, many different ways to become active again. Step back from the negative messaging, because chances are it's incorrect. Step back, question your assumptions, and be curious. That's 3 things.
That's right. Thank you. Shell?
I would say love yourself. Love yourself, because you love yourself and you really connect with yourself and learn and learn yourself and discover yourself, it's like it makes all of the other things easy to do because you're comfortable in your own skin and with yourself. It's really hard to be comfortable with the world and the people around us and everything that we do if we're not comfortable with ourselves. So I would say self-love.
Thank you. And Linda.
I would say get away from concrete. Stand on something other than concrete every day, whether it is bare soil or grass. I was going to say eliminate refined sugar, but I am a big fan of brownies. So I'll go with standing on something that is not concrete, and, do some prayers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for this talking circle.
Wow, my sincerest thanks to all of you. That was such an incredible talking circle. This has been such a fueling few hours for us, a perfect way to start this Thursday. So thank you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts at ASHA to all of the speakers and for all of you who joined. We have people joining from all over the world, which is truly incredible. And this sadly means that it's the end of the 2021 Grit and Grace Conference, but we do have a few important things to note. You'll be receiving a conference evaluation. We really encourage you to provide that anonymous feedback. That will help us continue to improve this conference. An important note for those of you who are seeking continuing education credit, you will need to complete that conference evaluation and a short quiz. And once you've done that and submitted both, we will send you a certificate for your continuing education. So a few quick housekeeping notes there. This officially ends the 2021 Grit and Grace Conference. If you would like to help support more great content like you just experienced this morning, please make sure you visit ASHA International and help us continue our mission with a donation. You may visit myasha.org to donate, or we will drop the link in the chat box to make it super easy for you. We genuinely and sincerely appreciate all the help. We absolutely love being able to put on events like this, and especially being able to put on events like this for free. So thank you to everyone. Take care and have a wonderful rest of your day.